They lied to us in elementary school? The facts that were total BS. That if you touch a baby duck, its mother will reject it. Ducks do not give an F. I've seen two mama ducks cross paths and unknowingly exchange a few babies with each other. That if someone's picking on you, that means that they like you. No. Some people are crappy bullies and are picking on you just because you're an easy target. Yeah. Walk away? Just ignore them and they'll stop? I tried that. Finally snapping and knocking someone on their butt proved a lot more effective. I learned in kindergarten that emperor penguins were the same height as us, which I guess was true at the time, but as I grew, I still thought that they were the same height as I was. Then, as a teenager, I was surprised when I saw penguins at the zoo that were only like 3 or 4 feet or so, and not my actual height. Being told that my shenanigans couldn't or wouldn't slide in high school. I was told in the 4th grade that teachers wouldn't accept anything but cursive in high school and college. Joke's on you, Miss Leons. Teachers didn't accept anything handwritten. That cracking your fingers gives you arthritis. My mum always said it causes arthritis. When I finally convinced her it didn't, she said it caused your knuckles to swell larger than usual. Still not sure if that's true. No, it's not. Cracking your knuckles just stretches the space between your joints, and that space has fluid in it to cushion your joints. The cracking sound is just air bubbles in that fluid popping. No harm done, no arthritis, and no larger knuckles. That I can't use my notes in life? The frick does that even mean? I'm always looking at my notes when I do my job. My most realistic to actual life tests were open notes, open book, open whatever, but purposefully designed so that there were more problems than you could finish in the allotted time if you were flipping around searching for a formula that you knew exists, but didn't know where it is. And I had a physics professor in college around 2010 that let us use formulas, no numbers, on a cheat sheet, because even professionals referenced them. His thinking was that if we didn't know how to apply said formulas, we wouldn't know how to get answers anyway. That class was still difficult as F, with really complicated exam questions. Still makes more sense than memorizing PV equals nRT. Yeah, I'm actually annoyed about that now. I have Google and I reference stuff constantly all the time at every officey adult job I've ever done. Why the heck did everyone tell us we'd have to memorize every process for everything in our lives? That's annoying. That illegal substances would be easy to come by, you'd make friends easily, and that people would be helpful when you're in need and if you ask. That being an astronaut is way harder than they sell it as a palpable career. Each generation since the space race started thought the next generation would have a lot more people living and working in space. If you told someone in 1970 that in 2022 nobody would have been to the moon in 50 years, they would not believe you. We had a teacher tell us that we only had so many uses before our vocal cords stopped working, so wasting it small-talking during class would cause us to go mute in our 30s. My grandma used to playfully tell me to save my kisses when I'd smooch her a bunch, which to 5-year-old me meant that kisses must run out at some point. I thought about this and remember deciding that kissing grandma was worth it, even if I did run out. I'd just need to be conservative with kisses for other people. That if I made faces, my face was going to get stuck like that. That Napoleon was short. Turns out he was average height for his time, and it was just British propaganda representing how small of a threat they perceived him to be. And he had the biggest guys in France as his personal bodyguards, so he generally looked smaller than he really was. Carrots improving your eyesight at night? Come on! It was started by the British back in World War II in an attempt to mask the fact that they'd developed an improved radar system. I always just imagined some Germans hate munching on carrots to try and test the theory. That I should never stand up to a bully. I should stop reacting so they'd get bored and leave me alone. That if I ever fought back, I'd be suspended so it wouldn't be worth it. Don't worry, every time I went to the teachers for help, I was told I needed to share my lunch so it wouldn't get stolen. I needed to be more forgiving and understanding because the girl who attacked me was on the cheer team. So this didn't give me some lasting problems with conflict. Nope. Fighting a bully and making it a sure thing that they'll not get away unscathed is the only way to temporarily stop them. They'll do the unconscious risk and reward calculation in their head and think, last time I did this I still won, but I had some bruises. Maybe I'll pick an easier target for a while. This guy I knew in high school only actually stopped bullying when someone gave him a traumatic brain injury by hitting him from behind with a half brick, after he and his mates had kicked the guy's brother on the ground until he was unconscious. Those 2 kids were sent to another school, and the bully showed up like 3 more days the rest of the school year with a helper. I'm not condoning this, but I can't condemn it either. That if I went to college, I'd get a good job and be able to buy a big house with a pool. Ha! Now I'm an adult, a pool just seems like a massive pain. You got a fence in your yard, your homeowner's insurance is going to cost more, got to buy a bunch of chemicals, test the water often, the water bill's going to be through the roof the month you fill it, and you maybe get to use it 3 months out of the year before you drain it and cover it for the winter. This'll go down on your permanent record. I hear Santa keeps a pretty detailed record. Funny story, apparently when I was really little, I was something of a smart aleck. And one time when I was misbehaving, my mum threatened to pick up the phone and call Santa to tell him I was being bad if I didn't behave. I apparently retorted that Santa should already know anyway, so why did she need to call him? And she didn't know how to respond to that. That all of my high school teachers and my professors, once I got to college, would require cursive. If I tried to hand one of my professors a paper written in all cursive, I'm pretty sure they'd kill me on the spot. I had professors who wouldn't accept handwritten work at all because we had blind grading, and they didn't want to risk recognizing our handwriting. You won't always have a calculator in your pocket. Ha! Not even that long ago I was told that. Smartphones were literally already a thing when they said that. Even before smartphones, if your job involved math, you absolutely would have a calculator available. And before calculators, the slide rule in the front pocket was a basic part of an engineer's business attire. Pilots had navigational and fuel calculation slide rules and stuff. I sometimes do math on paper though, because phone is on the charger in the other room and I'm too lazy to get it. That blood is blue before it touches the air. I was taught this one as well. We were taught that if you stuck your arm in a plastic bag and cut something, the blood would flow blue. I literally have no idea how or why we were taught this one. Why would a teacher ever explain it this way? You know some kid's gonna try it. We were once forced to do this profession test to find out our dream job, and one of the options was to become a Pokemon trainer. To this day, nobody ever offered me a starter Pokemon. I got Garbage Man because I answered yes to a lot of the outdoorsy questions, and my teacher made fun of me for it and said this is probably what I'd be. She wasn't fond of me because I was a smart aleck. Honestly, to this day, I've thought being a street sweeper would be cool. Early mornings, nobody on the road, just cruising along listening to music, and then occasionally dumping dirt in front of somebody's house that I didn't like. Apparently, bears just nap a lot in the winter and don't take a 3-month mega nap. Hibernation is reserved for frogs and some mammals. We use the word for long slumbers, but we do use it incorrectly. As a Canadian, our teacher would tell us things like squirrels hibernate, while we watched them run around outside the window in -20. I was shocked to read this, and when I looked it up, it says that bears sleep for weeks at a time and can sleep for 100 days without eating, drinking, or passing water. The difference between what they do, which is called torpor, and what smaller mammals can do, like true hibernation, is that in torpor you can wake easily if threatened. Smaller animals like chipmunks lower their body temperature below freezing and their heart rate from 350 beats per minute to 4 beats per minute so they can't come online quickly if found or threatened. So yeah, I don't know that I'd call this a lie as much as a simplification. That is fascinating to be honest. So we can sneak up on a frozen chipmunk or frog for an easy meal, but not on a bear or wolf. Not that any of us stand a chance against those latter two, regardless of how slow they are to wake. Taste bud zones. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, that's all what I was taught. Also, the frickin' food pyramid has changed so much, it's ridiculous. That's because the food pyramid was propaganda and the lies it sat upon have been disproven by science. That in high school you can only write with pens and only write in cursive. Both of these claims were false. Granted, if I write on any official documents at work using a pencil, I'll get a talking to by our VP of Quality and Documentation. Nobody has offered me substances yet. The DARE program made it seem like I'd have to be running away from people in vans offering me sweet doobies every time I went on a walk. I was never offered anything cool until I was in the latter half of my teenage years, and even then the conversations would go like this. "Oh hey man, you want to try some wacky tobacco?" "No thanks." "Okay." And even then, these people weren't strangers. Also, the fact that it increased substance use? I thought the DARE program just failed. No, it was so bad it had the opposite effect. Turns out if you tell people they'll eat their friends' faces off if they smoke a single Mary J cigarette, when they see people use it safely, they won't believe anything else you said. That cheaters never win in the end. Only good people succeed. I mean, it's a nice sentiment, but all lies. We were taught that platypus or platypi were extinct. Not endangered, not almost extinct, just extinct. Imagine my surprise when I discovered the internet. Also, for whatever reason, we were taught that granite was a metamorphic rock. I'm taking college geology, and it's shown me that all previous education prior to college is obsolete. What state and country taught you that the platypus was extinct? How was that mistake made? I met a guy from Germany once who was taught in school that Native Americans were extinct. He was very excited to learn the truth. That doing sponsored fun runs would end world poverty. It doesn't seem like it played out that way. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? That there's no such thing as a stupid question. Reader, there is. To be fair to them, they didn't think there was such a thing as a stupid question until you asked yours. To raise my head up in the case of a bloody nose, which is stupid, just face the ground and breathe through your mouth. It helps, trust me. I was told that people would be offering me free substances all the time. Where are these people? I think they all fell in quicksand and died. Nope, they got lost in the Bermuda Triangle. That doing something bad would go on my permanent record. That was so stupid. We're sorry to inform you that we can't allow you to graduate after looking through your permanent record, due to the crayon you broke in half in the 2nd grade. My physics teacher told me to never pursue art, because her father was an artist, and apparently they grew up poor and occasionally eating dog food. She made a point to call out my artistic pursuits during class, and called them unwise life choices. I ended up pursuing it anyways. I make pretty good money as a designer. My 6th grade teacher taught us that 4:15 was 4:25, and she wasn't joking. I can see where she went wrong, which is understandable and could be a one-off mistake. Like brain fart kind of situation, I just hope she didn't stress it repeatedly. Similar thing happened to me the other week. I argued for a good 5 seconds that 1 milligram was 1/1000th of a kilogram. My stupid brain forgot about grams. And I've got my frickin' honors in mechatronics engineering. Christopher Columbus proved the Earth was round by discovering America. In no way is that correct. First, we've known that the Earth is round since ancient Egypt. And even if we didn't, America didn't prove the Earth was round because it turned out to be an entirely different continent than Asia. George Washington chopped down a cherry tree, lied about it, and learned his morals thereafter. That recycling plastic is an effective way to help save the environment. Turns out the whole campaign was started by the oil industry as a way to make people feel better about buying plastic, knowing all along that there was never any infrastructure in place to feasibly separate and clean plastics, so they end up tossed in the landfill with everything else. I'm hoping this will change as smaller companies start adopting better practices, but the vast majority of these are doing the same greenwashing in the name of creating a positive environmental culture, whilst actually not doing anything to help. As someone that's really jumped into environmentalism and conservation, it was heartbreaking to learn about this. I'm hopeful that we can make better advancements on biodegradable plastics, since ocean plastic is projected to triple by 2040 at our current rate. Aluminum's actually very recyclable, because making new aluminum from bauxite requires a lot of energy. Melting aluminum cans down and making new aluminum out of them is solidly cheaper than making new aluminum. Glass is very reusable. If you don't break it, a glass bottle can be cleaned and reused pretty much indefinitely. Ask any brew pub how many growlers they refill. Recycling glass is not nearly as efficient as just reusing it without melting it down. Plastic is not very recyclable. It can pretty much only be made into crappier forms of plastic, so plastic bottles can be made into a park bench, but worn-out park bench can't be made into bottles. Instead, it's made into environmental microplastics as it erodes. Yay. You won't always have a calculator with you. Well, I do, but the mental arithmetic is sometimes still faster than pulling out the phone. That atoms are indestructible. Maybe they meant they couldn't be broken down into smaller pieces, which is also wrong. And even the subatomic particles themselves can be broken down. The DARE program told me I'd be offered free green herb, but that's never once happened to me. So unfair. Hey, if you don't go to parties, you won't make friends. Yeah, parents are like, you should go out more and make some friends. Then you bring your friends over to introduce them to your parents, and they'll be like, those aren't the kind of friends we meant. The biggest lie I've been told is that you can neatly pack surrounding nature into categories. Systematics are one of the most convoluted fields of biology, with species parkouring all across the bloody thing with every new genetic analysis. Learning to type in the 90s, pretty much every teacher I had insisted that you needed 2 spaces after every period. Well, apparently that's wrong now, but frick it, I still do it. Gotta say I was never taught this, but I get work submitted to me by someone who always does that. Suddenly it makes sense if this is something that was taught. That there are 5 senses. There's like a bunch more than 5, guys. Well, they're not going to explain that to a whole class of 6-year-olds, how the body can detect temperature, location in space, and limb location and stuff. Better to keep it simple. We were taught in high school that your heart only had so many beats, and that when that number was over, your heart stopped and died. I couldn't figure out how this worked, since different people would have a different number of total beats their heart had available. Now I work in the medical field and see how it really happens. Oh god, that would have horrified me as a kid if I'd heard it. You would have seen me obsessing about lowering ambient temperatures, never exercising, and avoiding literally anyone who ever stressed me out, to a point of cowardice. Oh, wait, I've ended up doing that anyway. Turns out it wouldn't have changed my life at all. That the crust of the bread has all the nutrients. Thanks, Mum. That you can do or be anything you want as long as you try hard enough and make good choices. Pfft. Come on. I mean, technically it's not false, but the amount of time the school spent teaching us to stop, drop, and roll to put out flames made me believe that being on fire would be a much more frequent problem in my life than it has ever been. The reason is, it works. It's been incredibly effectively ingrained in the heads of schoolchildren for decades, to the point of being a subconscious action people take without even thinking about it. Same as checking a door for heat with the back of a hand and staying low in smoke. Sure. The net is much larger than the group that'll need it in their lifetimes, but the results justify it. Did you hear about Pluto? That's messed up, right? Well, the plot, unlike your hair, continues to thicken. Authority should never be questioned. That I'd basically be useless to the world if I didn't learn cursive anything. I'm pretty sure they stopped teaching it a year or 2 later. Seriously, I spent so much time learning cursive, I want those endless hours back. Also, I feel so bad for my poor teachers when every one of our assignments had to be written in cursive. They didn't deserve to have to go through all that. That if I tuck myself into a ball and cover my head with my hands, a tornado will have mercy on me. I mean, technically, it will help protect you from fall debris. Tornadoes are weird. They'll level an entire house while leaving a glass upright on an intact table. They'll pick up a jar of pickles and set it down kilometers away unscathed. Super erratic and unpredictable. I before E, except after C. Huh, weird. Your teachers in university or college will be even stricter than me. Nope. Called my lecturers and professors by their first name, they respected us students and we often hung out and drank together. 1. That your appendix is useless. While it does cause more harm than good if it gets infected, it's believed to protect the good bacteria in your gut. That George Washington's false teeth were made out of wood. Nope, they were real teeth from slaves, which is just plain awful and probably explains why they went with the gross wood idea. And that your tongue has taste zones. To be honest, I never believed that one, even in elementary school, because it just didn't make sense. Oh god, the thing about George Washington's teeth reminded me of a book I read in probably the 3rd grade, maybe even younger, about his life that had a large part dedicated to how he lost his teeth and needed dentures in his 20s. And I do actually remember it talking about how dentists used real teeth to make the dentures, although I don't think the book ever specified where the teeth came from, probably because it was a children's book. Those lemmings were pushed off the cliff by Disney. They don't do that naturally. I'm confused on what this means. Can you please elaborate? A Disney TV special back in 1958 called White Wilderness. They showed lemmings jumping to their death off a cliff. What really happened was the filmmakers threw them off the cliff to their death. Pluto used to be a planet, then he wasn't, and now he's a dwarf planet. I mean, he's also a cartoon dog and the dog of the underworld. Pluto sure does have a busy schedule. Words can hurt me, Mrs. Dubis. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can make me think I deserve it. That child humans are made to stay at a seated position for half their wake time. I had a bag of frozen veggies placed on my lap with a warning of, I'd better not hear any crunching or shuffling or else. It was cold, and it hurt. The same teacher also shoved my desk into the adjoining bathroom because I was, quote, being bad. The first grade was so fun. I was later diagnosed with ADHD. Let me tell you now, being nice to others is not always reciprocated in kind. Yeah, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, though. That Elia's pants could catch on fire. It would really make things simpler if they did. I read in a science textbook that by 2025 all potable water would end due to pollution. Gave little middle school me a minor life crisis thinking I'd die of thirst before I hit 30. Turning on the light in the car is not, in fact, illegal. That Indians were happy to be given the reservations and the chance to go to school. Yeah, may as well have told us all of them went back to their families and lived long and happy lives. If you don't go to university, you'll end up on the street. The potato skins were poisonous. Well, this is actually from solanine, which has poisoned some if they ate lots of the green parts that weren't thoroughly cooked, so some are conditionally poisonous. What's the worst surprise injury you've seen at a medical checkup? I'm an X-ray tech. Had a patient walk into the urgent care for hip X-rays. Her order said it was for hip pain, which is pretty routine. Turns out she had walked in on not one, but 2 fractured hips. Can't even frickin' imagine how painful that must have been. Guy comes up to the triage window with his arms over his head, palms of his hands pressed against his ears. I'm in tremendous pain, he says when asked what's wrong. X-rayed him and found he had broken his neck. He had been walking around with that for 3 days. My brother once jumped on the front of my white car, grabbing the front pillars with his hands. I closed the door and caught his finger, which he pulled out quickly, as you do, but there was a tiny chip of paint that had come off the car and got lodged under the skin somehow. He must have spent a week or so chewing on it to try to get the paint out, but it wasn't working, so he went to a doctor to see if he could help. After checking it out, the doctor tells him, the reason you can't get that out is because it's your bone. Apparently, when I shut the door on his finger, I'd broken the tip of his pinky enough so that he could see the bone through the skin, and he'd spent the next few days trying to pull his own finger bone out with his teeth. I was a triage nurse in the ER when a patient calmly walked up and reported a complaint of pain in his side. He failed to mention the blood and the handle of the butcher knife sticking out of the left lower quadrant of his abdomen. He was a homeless schizophrenic who had been stabbed and had calmly walked into the ER and waited his turn to be seen. I mean, honestly, I'm just glad he came in at all. We also get a lot of people who come in for other things, like a sore throat or a cough, and when doing a skin assessment, we find a huge pressure ulcer or gangrenous feet. I've twice had patients' toes come off when removing their socks. Neither time had they come to the ER for that issue. A patient who had a routine checkup at his ophthalmologist, or eye doctor, who found a small spot in his retina. When referred to a university hospital, tests showed it was metastases from a small malignant melanoma he had on his back. Our professor cancelled our lecture because he had to tell this otherwise healthy man that he probably only had a couple of months left to live. Ugh, that's one heck of a bombshell to get when you've just finished your eye appointment, and you're just expecting to come away with 20/20 vision, maybe a new prescription? Sorry for that, my guy. I was working at Target. I lived half a mile away, so I walked to work. It totally sucked, but I was out of shape and have cold-induced asthma, so I ignored that. At this time, I was picking up shifts left and right, so sometimes I was closing the coffee shop, sometimes coming in at 4 a.m. to unload the truck. I was basically a zombie from what I assume was lack of sleep. This goes on for a couple of months until I had my annual physical. I was joking with my doctor that I was super exhausted from work and I must be getting out of shape because that half-mile walk to work really sucks. Turns out I had severe pneumonia, one lung was totally full of liquid and the other had some liquid as well. The doctor could not believe that I was still up and about, let alone walking to work and whatnot. Junior doctor from Australia here. I had a young lady come in for a pap smear. She was chatty and relaxed, not nervous at all. She lay on the bed and I got the speculum ready. I opened it up and instead of seeing her cervix, I saw a kiwi fruit-sized blob of bloody tissue just hanging out in her. It was one of my first pap smears that I'd ever done and I had a sudden bizarre thought that I'd broken her hoo-ha. I hadn't though, it was just a big uterine polyp that had emerged and was hanging out of her by a thread of tissue. She was mortified, although I tried to reassure her. This was a small town and later that day I went to the bakery to get some lunch and she was behind the counter. The most common surprise I see is patients in long-term marriages who come up positive for chlamydia. First-year nursing student in LA, and I was at clinicals when a guy who I had to do a physical assessment on, all we could do since we don't know much, he tells me he's been hearing strange cracklings and noises in his ear. I checked his ear and it's filled with so much wax and whatnot. I call my RN advisor and she proceeds to clean out the guy's ear. And what does she find? A frickin' fruit fly nest. Yeah, the medical field can get pretty rad. It's always insects. It's never a puppy. Oh. I'm sorry for making so many of you cringe at the thought of that happening. I'm sure it's not as common as some people mentioned, and by nest, I mean like 3 or 4 flies, not a whole frickin' hive. Mom's a nurse, and she told me about a time a bodybuilder came in with a pulled muscle somewhere in his abdomen that was causing him severe pain. Long story short, the guy was riddled with cancer. It was everywhere. Apparently, he was dead within 72 hours. Abdominal pain gets really weird reception from doctors, and understandably because there's a lot of stuff going on there. When I was 18, I thought I'd pulled a muscle in my abdomen and went to the ER because I could barely stand up, was in excruciating pain, sweating, and throwing up. They agreed it was a pulled muscle and dehydration and discharged me. This happened a few times over the years, until I got an IUD when I was 26 and the pain came back with a vengeance. And then just would not go away. I went to the ER, afraid I was one of those women who gets a perforation and ends up with their birth control floating around their abdominal cavity. Turns out I had a teratoma the size of a cantaloupe in my abdomen, causing intermittent ovarian torsion. Got super lucky that crap was benign, but I totally understand how it happens. Up until that ER visit, it was annoying but not severe pain. 10 doctors, 3 ERs, 2 GIs, and 4 OB-GYNs over 8 years had missed it. My ER doctor was so stoked to tell me my diagnosis. I was doing medical service in Guatemala, and we had an older gentleman come into our clinic to have a checkup. And the entire time he sat there with us, he was resting his arm on what we thought was a bag or purse on top of his leg. At one point, he goes to move, and we see a huge lump underneath his poncho, which we had initially assumed was his bag. We asked him about it. Turns out it was a tumor that had been growing for around 10 years on his leg, and he wasn't even going to tell us about that. I was putting a patient with mild breathing difficulty on a COPD research study. He remarked that he had been healthy as a horse all his life. The next day, his routine chest x-ray showed metastatic lung cancer. He was dead within 2 months. I did EMT work while deployed for local nationals seeking help. Had one guy get carried in from a nearby village and we were called out to the ECP to see what we could do. For a toothache. He's barely responding when we arrive and smells worse than death. It still makes me gag thinking about it. We start doing the usual initial contact assessment and this guy's in real bad shape. Vitals are all low, he's hardly there, and pus keeps oozing from his eyes and other orifices whenever you touch or apply any pressure to his face, which feels like an old, soggy banana. Come to find out that he's had an infection for like 10 years and it's spread throughout his skull, neck, and into his chest. This is from a single tooth. Long story short, he died not too long after that while we were waiting for transport. The guy went down because he didn't take care of an infection. I've never seen anything like that, and I doubt I ever will again. Guy comes in for an eye exam. I note that one eye seems a bit redder than the other. He tells me it's been like that since a branch snapped and hit him in the face 3 months earlier. I looked under his upper lid and there is a piece of wood the size of a tic-tac embedded in the underside of an eyelid. I cannot believe it didn't bother him more. A Marine shows up for a discharge physical. Notice what looks like cellulitis on his leg. Turns out it's a brown recluse bite that he's ignored. He had a fist-sized hole of dead tissue in his leg. We treated it with maggots for a few days. It healed over with a very nasty dent and scar. Yes, maggots are still a thing. We import them from Mexico. We dump them straight into the wound and put a clear cover over it so that we can see them. We check a few times a day to make sure there aren't too many dead ones in the wound. They'll only eat the dead tissue, and yes, the patient can feel them squirm. We also use leeches. They're good for the anticoagulant effect for things like finger reattachments. They keep the blood flowing and keep swelling down so the blood vessels can reattach and heal. We use cats in nursing homes to keep the residents in better spirits. Even the worst Alzheimer's patients seem to respond well to cats. We also use electric eels to help keep babies awake so that they… okay, that's not true, but it is funny. Oh boy, you had me going there, well done. And yes, please, when I'm an ancient old man, I would like to request several cats in eyesight at all time, please. I'll take or leave the maggots in my open wounds, even if they're definitely the best possible treatment. Ugh. I was the clueless patient in this story. I went to go see my doctor for a checkup. I had chest pains waking up that morning. I started to feel like someone was sitting on my chest. I walked 15 minutes to the physician's place, and apparently after he checked my breathing, he told me that I had to go to the ER to get my lungs x-rayed. Spent a week in the hospital for having a 40% collapsed lung. Doctors called it a spontaneous lung collapse. Really not the kind of spontaneity I'm looking for in my life. A lot of people are asking if I'm tall and skinny. I was pretty fit at the time. I was running half marathons. And I'd say average height, 5'11". Also, never smoked anything, ever. I went to an urgent care and somebody must have miscommunicated to the doc because I rolled into a room in a wheelchair and doc asked me about my cold. I said, I don't have a cold, but I'm not sure what I did to my leg, and I rolled up my pants. My kneecap was on the side of my leg. They seemed rather surprised and told me to go to the ER immediately. We just got a guy with Fournier's gangrene from a very alarmed family practice doc. His family jewels are in his thigh now. Let me just tell you, if you were thinking about searching Fournier's, it's gangrene on your private parts. Google Images has some exciting results, shall we say. Heard this story from my aunt who works in an eye center. One day, this woman came in with her friends, all drunk and high as F. She was holding her eyeball. Somehow she had managed to get hit in the face by a pair of heels, and it pulled out her eyeball in the process. The kicker is, after surgery and all that, she still seemed cheerful and even asked my aunt when her eyesight would recover. Apparently, she was under the impression that her eyeball could be reattached. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. So I'm the moron patient in this story. I'd fallen through a ceiling 3 years prior and had just worn a knee brace. My employer required me to go to the company doctor for a yearly physical. I'm not a doc, so I can't gauge, but here's the list that came out of that visit. Torn meniscus, ACL, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's disease, and, well, the place I went to had in-house genetic testing, you see, and the doctor suggested that I should get tested, since I had Hashimoto's and rheumatoid, to help determine what else I had. It was out of pocket, but I thought, sure, why not? I'm sure it's one of those upsell sort of deals, but it really paid off in my case. The test found all kinds of crazy crap that I carried but don't have as of now. Most of it autoimmune related. But the biggest one was Thompson's disease, which is what those fainting goats have that causes them to faint. In reality, my understanding is that they don't actually faint, it's that their muscles involuntarily lock up and they physically just can't get up. I have a mild case of it that only affects my arms, but it's estimated that it's like 1 in a million have the mutation. I have to wear a brace on my arms from time to time if I have to make a very quick movement. I'd had a lot of unexplained muscle soreness that suddenly made sense to me. Another weird side effect I have is that I have trouble swallowing food from time to time, and if I go all day without eating, it's almost impossible to hold my eyes open by the evening, and it has nothing to do with whether I'm sleepy or not. He's my primary care now. Amazingly thorough. Pre-registration optometrist here. Had a lady present recently for an eye test following months of very painful headaches. She had had scans done at the hospital recently and everything had come back normal. The only reason she was in for a test was that her eyes were the last thing she could think were causing it, and she was due for a checkup anyway. Cue me looking into her eyes and finding her optic nerves in both eyes, which usually lie flat against the back of the eye, swollen and pressing forward, with massive hemorrhages in the nerve fiber layer of her retina. Naturally, the hospital was phoned and she was seen within the hour. The swelling had been caused by raised pressure in her head, a potentially life-threatening condition. As far as I'm aware, the neurologists are on top of it and she's been recovering well. Scary stuff, as I'd only been qualified 2 months at the time. Okay, so mine's nothing on some of the things that are here, but I can share something I found myself. I'm an ophthalmic technician. Basically, my job is to do the diagnostic scans and workups on patients before the eye surgeon sees them for routine consultations. One lady came in, referred from her optometrist for cataract surgery. The optometrist did note she had slightly higher than normal pressure in one eye at 23, normally ranging typically between 10 and 20. When I checked her pressure, it had risen to 35. Normally, straight after this, I'd dilate her eyes so the doctor can see inside, but I told the lady that based on a hunch, I wanted to do a scan of the angles between her iris and cornea before doing that. I found that these angles had closed. Basically, due to her growing cataract, her iris had pushed out, blocking the gap at the outer edge of her iris, where the fluid in the eye generally flows. Because of this, the fluid in her eyes was very quickly rising. Acute angle closure glaucoma isn't rare, but if you dilate someone's eye who has it, You close those angles even more, and eye pressure continues to rise rapidly, causing death of nerves in the eye. Now, I'm just the tech, but thanks to my hunch and scanning first, I might have saved her sight. The doctor performed laser treatment that day to hold those angles open until her cataracts could be removed. I'm a nurse. Some guy came in with Lefort 2 and 3 fractures. Said he fell and hit his head on a tractor step about a week ago. Was just coming in for medication refills when we asked about the mild facial trauma. He had a little laceration and unremarkable bruising on his face. He denied all pain medication and very minimally accepted it after surgery only because we practically talked him into it. Maxillofacial surgeon was very excited about it. She came down personally to get him and take him up to surgery. This wasn't so much a regular routine checkup, rather a 36-week pregnant woman coming into the doctor in the box complaining of nausea, vomiting, and pain between her shoulders. We ultrasounded her abdomen, everything was fine with the kid. Somebody had the bright idea that as long as the ultrasound was out, to ultrasound between her shoulders. To our astonishment, she had a huge dissecting aortic aneurysm. She had to be survival flighted to a level 3 place and have a crash C-section and her aneurysm fixed. The aneurysm was at least 5 centimeters across. Both herself and the baby made it. A friend of mine worked in the ICU, and he once told me about a girl who came in that was on a jet ski and her bikini bottoms got caught on something and ripped her entire bottom open. Front to back of her downstairs was completely ripped open. He said that stitching her up was incredibly awkward because she was a little drugged and kind of flirty. Y'all motherfrickers make me want to get a full body exam, because I have read some scary stuff here. Yep, better just go and book my next physical, because this group of comments is basically telling me that any number of aches and pains over the last few years were probably a symptom of full-blown cancer or some deadly transmissible disease. YOLO! I arrested a guy after a brief foot pursuit for attempted burglary and several other nuisance charges. He was covered in blood from multiple small scratches when I first found him, and had a decent-sized gash above his eye that looked like it just needed a couple of stitches. So I took him to the ER to get stitched up, and they did a CT scan. The doctor was stitching the guy up and was about to release him when the CT comes back. Fractured orbital, resulting in an air pocket forming in the guy's brain cavity. Turns out the guy dove headfirst off a rooftop earlier that night and hit a fence on his way down. Apparently taking crystal all the time makes your life real exciting. Got a fever for a few days and had no other symptoms. I know that a fever without other symptoms can be really bad, so I went to the doctor. He says it's probably the flu and sends me home. Fever gets a little worse. I call him and tell him it's up to 102, and he tells me to go to the hospital. I get there, they give me meds to reduce the fever and do some blood work while keeping me in quarantine. I got my own room, which is nice. All because they didn't know what I had. My blood work comes back and I'm septic. They said that it came from too much oral bacteria getting into my bloodstream, and they usually see it with substance addicts that lick their arms before sticking a needle in, thinking that that's somehow sanitary. I traced it back to a mechanical toothbrush I got and how it made my gums bleed like crazy when I first started using it. So yeah, go easy on your teeth if you have sensitive gums. The bacteria in your own mouth can kill you if they bleed too much. It was a routine checkup. This older lady came in for bruising. She claimed that 2 weeks prior somebody had bumped into her on public transit, and now the bruise on her chest just wouldn't go away. Confused after having asked her weight and height, she was under 90 pounds. I asked if she'd lost any weight recently. Apparently, she's lost 40 pounds in the last 2 months. The bruise? It's malignant frickin' melanoma. Oh yeah, with metastasis everywhere. She was given a prognosis of 3 weeks to live. If I recall correctly, she passed in 2. Other injuries that rank high on the worst list: every pediatric code ever, firearm wounds to the face who are still conscious, patients who die with readily apparent defensive wounds, any injury that results in decorticate or decerebrate posturing, self-deletions who use razor blades to etch notes into their own skin, and those individuals on substances who rip both of their eyeballs out of their sockets with their own hands. Had a nurse back in South Africa who made this discovery. I was 6 or 7 and I just started feeling very ill. You know, fever, nausea, the standard symptoms of everything. I went to my family GP, who saw me and didn't even do a physical examination, declared that I just had a particularly bad case of the flu. Fast forward to 2 days later, I wake up in my bed, laying on my back, screaming for my mum in fear because I can't frickin' move. Total limb paralysis. Mum, being the good parent she is, made the call to take me to the ER. She mentions that our GP said it was the flu and that it might have been a bad symptom. The nurse, and bless this woman, decides to do a physical and finds a tick tucked away under my armpit. Turns out I had tick paralysis and it was pretty far advanced. According to the attending, via my mum, if it had been a day or even 5 hours more, considering what sort of mood she was in when she tells the story, I'd be dead because it would have shut down my respiratory system. Not as insane as some of the ones here, but gosh darn, I'm thankful for nurses even to this day. My uncle is a severe hypochondriac, and it almost always leads to complete hilarity. This is my favorite story of his nonsense. He, along with my aunt and cousins, had a big family trip planned about 5 years ago. Don't remember where to, but far enough that they had plane tickets booked. Fast forward to the day before the trip, my uncle says he can't go. He's been seeing this very weird object in the corner of his right eye for a couple of days, especially anytime he turns his head to the right. Naturally, to him, that means he's dying, and he doesn't want to die on that trip and make his family deal with flying his body back home to bury him. So, the entire family ends up staying home and cancelling their vacation plans. My uncle goes to the doctor 2 days later, convinced he's days away from death. He tells the doctor about this weird object he keeps seeing out of the corner of his eye, but can never really focus on it. Doctor initially thinks it might be an eye issue, but my uncle is convinced that it's a fast-spreading terminal brain tumor that is somehow foretelling his imminent death. Doctor takes a closer look, only to find the object that my uncle kept seeing in the corner of his eye is nothing more than an enormous grey ear hair coming out of his right ear. Literally like a 6-inch ear hair that often happened to find its way into his line of sight, most specifically when he'd turn his head to the right. In short, my uncle thought that an abnormally long ear hair was a sure sign of his imminent death. Guy came into our place with an opened sack.
Santa?
Med student here. I was shadowing in the ED when a bloke came in who messed up a huge jump on his mountain bike without his helmet on properly. He was going fast, landed on his chin, and slid along the hard dirt. Inside his mouth, he'd completely detached his lower gum from his jaw. Ugh! And his mandible was clearly visible as soon as he opened his mouth. There was a lot of blood and a lot of stitching to do. Ugh! What golden nugget of wisdom did you learn that changed your outlook on life? In the center courtyard of the Pentagon, you don't have to salute superior officers. It's a recreation and lunch area, and you'd basically spend the whole time saluting. So it's not required there. The source? My uncle, a Navy corpsman who currently works at the Pentagon. Stonehenge, the world's most famous henge, isn't actually a henge. A henge is a Neolithic earthworks, oval or circular in shape, sometimes containing wooden or stone structures and surrounded by a perimeter of a bank with internal ditch. So the famous stones of Stonehenge aren't even a necessary part of a henge, just an optional extra. But more importantly, the bank and ditch at Stonehenge are the wrong way around to make it an official henge. So Stonehenge isn't a henge. However, the earliest recorded use of the word henge is in reference to Stonehenge, so non-henge Stonehenge, despite not being a henge, is the thing all other henges are named after. If you don't have a toilet plunger and you've clogged your loo up, pour in a bit of dish soap and some hot water, the hotter the better, let it stand for 15 minutes and flush. Learned this way when I realized upon arriving at our hotel that my 8-year-old had clogged up our loo and I googled it. Found this gem, realized I'd packed a tiny travel bottle of dish soap, warmed some water up in the microwave, and lo and behold, it worked. I still use it sometimes at home when I don't want to be grossed out by plunging. Yes, my child still has a tendency to clog toilets. So there you go. X percentage of Y is the same as Y percentage of X. So if you're struggling to find 26% of 50, maybe 50% of 26, which is 13, is much easier to do quickly. Control-Shift-Escape opens straight to the Task Manager instead of Control-Alt-Delete and then manually selecting Task Manager. If your older parents or grandparents are suddenly acting out, get them checked for a UTI. In older people, UTIs can cause a psychotic or delusional episode. Monkeys have a very distinct way of tickling their monkey pickles, and yes, they do that constantly. In contrast to the normal human male way of forming a tube with their hands, they create a shovel with their hands and cup their equipment from underneath and repeatedly rub it. And no, I don't watch monkeys do this, I just saw it in a documentary. Update: guys, I really don't watch monkeys doing that all the time. Update 2: guys, seriously, this is like 4 days old now, how are you finding this? I don't watch monkeys having fun with themselves, I swear. I don't have links to monkey smut. I love this for reasons that don't at all pertain to the original fact that our poor commenter left here. And yes, the replies to this comment were almost all people telling him that he must watch this stuff all the time. I guess now that I know this fact, I can never bring it up to anyone else because of course it's going to raise suspicion. Horses have a massive blind spot on the front and back of their body. If you're ever around a tame horse, keep a hand on their body while walking around them. This lets it know where you are at all times and decreases chances of kicking out of shock or fear. This also prevents them from kicking you with as much force, as you need to stay very close to them for the full benefit. This is similar with goats, as they instinctively fight things coming head-on and should be approached from the sides. Also, ears are the gateway to a horse's feelings. Pinned back ears indicate an anxious or angered horse. Pinned straight up indicates curiosity and focus. At the beginning of every relationship, agree to assume positive intent. Talk about it often, don't forget about it, and make it the most important rule. Fights will be fewer, empathy will be greater, and your relationship will be stronger. Hot and cold water have different viscosities. Not enough to feel a difference, but enough to hear one when you're pouring it. Even though you have a VPN, it doesn't necessarily keep you hidden if skilled people wanted to find you. There are many things that can leak your IP that you have to isolate and fix, such as IPv6 leaks, DNS leaks, and WebRTC leaks. Also, every add-on that you add to your browser gives you a unique fingerprint that can lead back to you. You are not as secure as you think. Artillery was responsible for over 70% of combat casualties in both world wars. And 4% of sand on the beaches of Normandy is still made up of shrapnel. Oh, that last one's mind-blowing. Really drives the point home of how it must have been hell on Earth. A scorpion can hold its breath for 6 days, so don't think drowning it will help you out of your scorpion problem. A moose can run 40 miles per hour through 6-foot deep snow. For a garment to be labeled Made in the USA, the process only needs to be started and finished in America. In the case of a certain ladies' underwear line, the material is cut in the USA, shipped overseas for assembly, then shipped back to America where a seamstress sews a Made in USA tag on the item. My source? I'm an underwear factory worker. 9 months before Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus, a 15-year-old called Claudette Colvin refused to give up her seat. 2 police officers arrested her. Colvin says that civil rights leaders didn't think a teen, especially one with a very dark complexion, would be a good poster child for their movement. When looking at renting a car or hotel room or something, type in your company's name, then the words discount code, then the vendor into Google. For example, Wells Fargo Hertz discount code. You can get better rates on these items usually. Iron can make your poop color turn black. When Elton John changed his name from Reginald Dwight, he also gave himself a middle name. His full name is Elton Hercules John. The Earth wobbles really slowly like a spinning top. It takes about 26,000 years to come full circle. In the process, the northern star changes. This is called precession. It's one of 3 major changes in Earth's movements, which are a part of the Milankovitch cycle. Precession occurs 26,000 years. Eccentricity occurs every 125,000 years, and obliquity occurs every 41,000 years. These cycles all have effects on Earth's climate. For more information, just search Milankovitch cycles. Airline ops guy here. If you check in a bag at an airport with an hour or less before departure, it has a 50-50 shot of making it on the plane. Just like the TSA line, bag security can back up too. I regularly see 30+ minutes in screening statuses on bags. Then it might be pulled for hand screening and search. This is random and TSA doesn't care when the flight leaves. So now we're at about 25 minutes to departure and your bag has only just now entered the sort system. It will take another 5 to 10 minutes to sort out to the person who loads carts with bags. Here, the problem is that there might be another 7 to 10 other flights coming off the same conveyor belt. They have to see your bags tag out of maybe 50 other bags, so let's assume another 5 minutes. Your flight's bag cart was delivered plainside at an hour before departure, so it's now 15 minutes to departure. The bag room has seen your bag and has it on the back of a tug racing to the plane. 7 minutes before departure, the baggage compartments are closed and total weights are being submitted. Your bag has missed the airplane. In short, please check in more than an hour before your flight if checking a bag, or else it might not make it on the plane. I had a heart transplant 5 years ago. When your heart is replaced, the surgeon has to cut the main nerve that gets the signal from the brain to beat and increases the intensity of the beat when needed. Without this vagus nerve, your new heart has no regulation and pumps blood out of habit. You no longer have a flight or flight response, and your new heart beats at 90+ beats a minute. My new heart beats purely from muscle memory. I can't think about it for too long because it's just too freaky. Never miss a chance to pee. That's always my go-to. I had a choir practice in a group of more than 200 people, and I sat right in the middle where there was no legroom to leave. Right before the rehearsal, I thought, I should use the bathroom. And then I thought, nah, I'm good. 3.5 hours later, I'm sweating, nearly crying because I have to go so bad. I prayed so hard for my bladder to be sustained. I was finally able to waddle to a toilet and had a moment of pure ecstasy. In summary, never pass up the chance to use the restroom. That's the old piece of advice from Winston Churchill, isn't it? And although it's sound, it has to be pointed out that he was a 60-something-year-old alcoholic man with a terrible diet even for World War II, and was likely far more regular than any of us. Bloody miracle the old bloke shuffled off his mortal coil at 90, if you ask me. That a strong sense of doom is a medically recognized and majority common precursor to having a heart attack. Armadillos give birth to 4 identical twins, always. There are 3 ways to refer to a gathering of geese. If they're on the ground, it's a gaggle. If they're flying, but not in a V-shape formation, it's a skein. And if they're flying and in a V-shape formation, it's a wedge. A single spaghetti noodle is called a spaghetto. I thought a spaghetto was a place where poor Italians lived. When you move to a new place, take a 30-minute walk through the neighborhood. Even if you just stop at a 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee, it'll make it feel a lot more like home. Get a first aid course. It really does save lives. The concept of 3 square meals a day is a diet designed for people working physical labor in the early 1900s. Quality of diet and sticking to daily calorie limits is the only part that really matters. Otherwise, it really doesn't matter what time you eat, although the 3 square meals model is indeed advantageous for day-long maintenance of energy levels. Basically, it's better to just eat when you're hungry than force yourself to eat when you should, so long as you're getting the proper nutrients and stuff. The Outer Bridge Crossing is a bridge that connects Staten Island, New York to Perth Amboy, New Jersey. You probably think it was named that because it's the outermost bridge in New York City. Wrong. It's named after Eugenius Harvey Outerbridge. All the colors of Fruit Loops have the same flavor. It's also true for Play-Doh. Newly registered nurse working on hematology ward and learned that stem cells smell like sweet corn. Update, I believe it's the preservative solution that they're kept in that smells and not the actual cells themselves. My colleague also mentioned this when I asked about the smell. The main reason we stop doing something we love is because we forget our love of doing it for enjoyment's sake and replace it with the desire to be good at it. Most people replace their computers or run them into the ground when they get hot and slow. In reality, new thermal compound and a solid-state drive upgrade can fix both problems and increase the computer's lifespan for about $35 to $50, and it is not hard to DIY in most cases. Canadians say sorry so much that an act passed in 2009 that states that an apology would not be considered an admission to guilt. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It's 100 times better to break up when you're in a crap relationship than trying to fix it up for the nth time. I work front desk at a hotel. I've seen this before, so I hope it's new to somebody. Don't use sites like Expedia and stuff. If you book directly with the hotel, you can always call to make changes. If you need to cancel, you can avoid the 24-hour window fee by changing your reservation to a few days later. Then call back the next day to cancel. Third-party booking sites are not easy to change the info on. We can't change the rate if something needs to be fixed, and as an Expedia customer, you're looked down upon and get whatever basic rooms are available. Not by me personally, but by everyone around me. The grey rock treatment is an incredibly useful method of dealing with narcissists and toxic people. If such a person is going at you verbally or behaviorally, screaming or posturing or trying to fight, become like a grey rock in a river. No reaction, don't answer, no movement. Just sit calmly and let the stream of crazy flow past you. Bonus points if you can stare blankly. When people thrive on causing a reaction, they absolutely cannot compute when they get no reaction. If you're in physical danger, obviously react to keep yourself safe, but don't argue, explain, or defend verbally. You'll never change a narcissist's mind, it's just walking on a treadmill. And obviously, no one solution works for everything. Keep yourself safe first and foremost. So many people have correctly pointed out that with people prone to physical violence, grey rocking can make them angry enough to escalate. Please evaluate your situation and the violent party, and use whatever tools are necessary to protect yourself. Even if you aren't willing to give mouth-to-mouth on an unconscious person, chest compressions alone greatly increase their odds of survival. If bees were paid the minimum wage, a jar of honey would cost about $200,000. Splooge, or baby batter, washes off best with cool water. Using hot water can cause the proteins to denature and makes it stickier. If you carry a baseball bat in your vehicle for self-defense, also carry a baseball glove. Even if you don't play baseball, your lawyer will appreciate it. If you ever have a baseball bat and need to use it as a weapon, put a sock over it so that if somebody tries to disarm you, they just slide off with the sock. You heard it here first, zombie apocalypse preppers. Chuck your brightest, pinkest sock over that bad boy so the zombies can't grab it off you. Also wild that I literally had 2 baseball assault-related comments back to back from one another. When choking on food and you can't get help, you can get into a push-up position and then just drop down. The ground hitting your stomach and chest could cause what you're choking on to dislodge. Somebody has commented to explain that this was created by a fireman, not something that firemen necessarily do themselves. You can also dislodge by jabbing the back end of a chair into your stomach. Please look up a guide on how to do this so you don't just stab yourself in the tummy with a chair leg. There are about 60,000 characters in the Mandarin language. A very literate person will know 20,000, the average person from 5,000 to 10,000, if uneducated, around 3,000. Each one of the Yamato-class battleship's main gun turrets weighed over 3,000 tons, heavier than the average US destroyer. If you were on a destroyer in the US Navy during World War II, you ran the risk of having to fight a ship whose primary weapons alone displaced more weight than your entire vessel. Gary Newman is 13 days older than Gary Oldman. If you see a job you really want but aren't qualified for, apply anyway. Don't tell yourself no. Make them tell you no. You might be pleasantly surprised. Both my son and daughter followed this advice and got a job that turned into a career. As a manager who hires people, yes, apply for everything you're reasonably competent for, even if you can't check all the boxes. Most of what I look for is experience and practical application of knowledge, skills, and tools. Even so, I'm aware that many aspects can be taught easily and quickly. We're also looking for general intelligence and character, good mindset, and work ethic. I manage the engineering department at my company. Even people applying for design, manufacturing, QC, or whatever we happen to be generally looking for aren't applying with the exact correct degree. There's a ton of overlap. Heck, what I even went to school for, I've barely used, nor have I really been hired on specifically for it. People often underestimate how big a billion actually is. An easy way to conceptualize it is to think of it in terms of seconds. 1 million seconds ago was 12 days ago. 1 billion seconds ago was 1987. The tensing of leg muscles will deflate unwanted rigidness of the male organ. Caterpillars are physically unable to burp. The human butthole can stretch up to 7 inches before taking damage. A raccoon can squeeze into holes as tight as 4 inches, meaning you can take almost 2 full raccoons up your butt. A 30-minute walk every day decreases the risk of you getting dementia. I keep meaning to do that, but always forget. The odds of you finding a gold nugget in a day are 0.000000784% on average. So, you're saying there's a chance? If you're in the woods and smell cucumbers, there is a copperhead snake nest nearby, or a man with a cucumber sandwich. Getting older is frickin' awesome. I'm 53, by the way. I feel confident, secure, and healthier than I've ever been in my entire life. I wish I could tell my 28-year-old self to relax and enjoy the ride more. Heat the back of a spoon gently under warm water and press it on a mosquito bite for a few seconds to greatly reduce itching. The heat breaks up the protein in the venom. Kangaroo has 3 hoo-has. Peanuts are not nuts, they're legumes, and they grow out of the ground like potatoes. Nuts and drupes typically grow on trees and are the seeds of fruits. You can be allergic to tree nuts and not to peanuts, and vice versa. Wherever you are, be there, said by someone wiser than me. I do try to apply this to my life, and I feel like it has great meaning. I've had it quoted to me by several respected people in my life. I'm not sure where it originated, but they're words to live by. Manhattan's layout is largely grid-based except for Broadway, which runs at a diagonal through the city and ignores the grid. This is because before the rest of Manhattan was developed, these roads were paths originally forged by Native Americans. The track's continued use over the years by people meant that it was simply left in as the city developed. Broadway exists because Native Americans, and it was probably a deer game trail before that. In the 16th century, Turkish women could initiate a divorce if their husbands didn't pour coffee for them. Look people in the eye, say please and thank you. Salespeople will go out of their way for you if you show appreciation. Domestic cats don't meow to communicate with other cats. They use meows almost exclusively to communicate with humans. I should have specified that this applies to adult cats and not kittens. I'm sure there are exceptions. Mostly they just learn to repeat the noise that elicits the strongest reaction. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that one of my relatives has accidentally trained her cat to make a high-pitched screaming noise by repeating it back to them, especially when it's time for feeding. Now whenever the damn thing is hungry or needs to go through a door or anything, the entire house is awoken by what sounds like a distant child going down a slide. It's hilarious and annoying. Seasonal allergies are almost entirely man-made ailments. When planting landscaping trees and bushes in the 50s and 60s, people didn't want to use female trees as they didn't want fruit to fall on streets or on people's cars, so they opted for almost entirely male trees, thus drastically increasing the pollen output. Sometimes it's best to let go of people. The airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow, European, is 11 meters a second or 24 miles per hour. Smells are particulate. When you smell anything, you're getting particles of that thing in your nose. It doesn't seem so bad to think of the microscopic cake particles in your sinuses when you smell it baking, but when you smell a fart or the stench of a public bathroom, that's microscopic poop particles in your sinuses. Nasty. The writing staff for Futurama were probably the most highly educated group of writers a cartoon has ever had. Don't buy French bulldogs. They're a fad breed that was sick to begin with, and so many people are being scammed by backyard breeders and puppy farms. They're just so depressingly broken. If you do buy one, even from an official breeder, be prepared for allergies, ocular bleeding from eye pressure, hip dysplasia, cheery eye, trachea collapse, twisted spine, and dreadful breathing problems. They are expensive. Too many teen girls buy them and can't afford the allergy meds and food and just leave them to suffer. One visited the clinic last week, collapsed and died because of an extra long walk in the sunshine. Just don't do it. Let this breed disappear and buy a dog with a nose, please. The pain of discipline is temporary, the pain of regret is permanent. Vaccinations don't cause autism. I believe the reason many anti-vaxxers believe that they cause autism is because unvaccinated children don't live long enough to be tested for autism. Don't put up with anyone who constantly puts you down, especially anyone from your own family. People can overlook how damaging it can be to your well-being. I don't care what they make you think you did to deserve it. You don't. Full stop. Never pour water into any acid because it will splash out acid at 600 kelvins, which is like 300 degrees Celsius. If you have to mix water and acid, always put water first, then acid. This is because the reaction of acid dissolution is exothermic, meaning it will create a big quantity of heat, thus the splashing. But if you put a drop of acid in the water, the reaction won't heat enough to splash. The distinctive smell, or petrichor, of summer rain is caused by the molecule geosmin, a byproduct of Streptomyces bacteria. Most of us fit and active people don't enjoy exercise, we enjoy the feeling when it's done. So if you hate running, hate cycling, and hate lifting weights, most of us do too. Don't wait for something to click, just get out there and do it and get it done. You'll enjoy how you feel later in the day and you'll be proud of the results long term. Admit it when you're wrong. Say it out loud to the person you were incorrect to, and don't let your pride stop you. The amount of respect you instantly gain is shocking, no matter how much you like the person. What small habit about someone else raises a red flag and makes you distrust them? When they talk mad trash about everyone around them to you, and since it's all nonsense, you just let it go in one ear and out the other, but then the moment you vent a frustration, they run and tell everyone this exaggerated story which makes you look awful, and the whole time you know they're at the fire starter, but you can't say anything without looking petty. And that's how I quit my job. You'll have fun with that. When they can't be happy when their friends succeed in the ways they haven't. If your jealousy is that profound, I don't want to be around you. One better syndrome, where no matter what your experience, your history, or your anecdote is, theirs is better, worse, or funnier. When I was younger, we called them the one-uppers. When someone borrows something and never even attempts to return it or mention it until you bring it up. Not respecting my decision when I say no to something small. Thank you for letting me know that you don't respect boundaries. When they put a lot of energy into manipulating people instead of just living their lives. Many have pointed out that what I'm describing is not a small thing. Overall, that's true. However, what I'm talking about is the small, subtle efforts these people make throughout the day. That's what came to mind for me when considering the question. When they don't respect people's boundaries, borrowing things without asking personal questions when you're not close, borrowing a small amount of money and not paying it back, stuff like that. They constantly talk crap about others, but all the stories are skewed to their favor. I watch my mouth around people like that and try to only say things that I don't mind getting out. Bonus points if they add how these people are positively influenced by the storyteller and how he had helped them in their lives. Being in my 30s now, it still baffles me how friends of mine on Facebook continue to post obscure statements about cutting people out who are ungrateful or what have you. Always feels like needless drama that could have been avoided earlier on because adults, but whatever. Honestly, this has made me realize that I see more baffling and passive-aggressive posts from people my age and older than I do in the Zoomers coming up. Maybe the Zs are actually smarter than us about the dangers of social media after all. People who can't keep something to themselves and talk about another person's private matters. I'm very private about myself, as trust takes years to build up, but seconds to shatter. If they make up an answer for something instead of just saying, I don't know. I married my husband in part because I told him my car was making a funny noise and could he help, and he said, I can open the hood, I can look at it, I can say, yep, that looks like an engine, and after that, I'm lost. They told me not to tell anyone, but I'll never trust anyone like that. If they tell me people's secrets, they'll no doubt tell other people mine. If they don't use their blinkers, and we're talking about before you change lanes, turning them on mid-change is useless. I already see you in 2 lanes, you're not warning me of crap now. Any interviewer that brags about the family atmosphere at work or puts too much emphasis on the culture. We work really hard, but we're like family, so it's totally okay if we take advantage of you. I left a job after our manager put a snide post on Facebook saying how we're a big family and he's so chill and better than other stores of the same company in the area, so we shouldn't complain about things to management because we wouldn't want to work at the other stores, right? This is a day after I found out my bonus had been cut for several months. Mate, if I worked at the other stores, I'd have double the hours and a much larger bonus. Don't throw the family thing in my face. Passive aggression. For example, instead of telling me what the problem is, doing a bunch of petty crap seemingly to retaliate and expecting me to know why. Hey, I'm having some people over this weekend. I'm gonna have drinks and some food. You should come by. Weekend comes by. Thanks for coming, everyone. So today I'd like to talk about an amazing business opportunity. Hell nah to the nah. Oh, my boss did this to me and my wife once. Went over thinking it was going to be a regular boring dinner party, but his wife wanted us to donate a few thousand into her candle company. Turned to crap when they started arguing about their relationship and got the cops called over. Worst dinner I ever had. Someone who constantly interrupts. I don't trust physicians who never say, I don't know. The most dangerous physicians are the ones who make a bad call and then defend it with all of their might. Those who answer a question incorrectly with supreme confidence. If a doc occasionally says, I don't know, let's look it up, then I know I can trust her or him. If you make a snarky or rude comment to me disguised as something neutral or helpful, only something I've encountered with other women, honestly. It's something you pick up on if you pay attention, but it's usually really subtle. Here's an example to paint a picture. I recently was at a work event next to a chocolate fountain talking to one of my male co-workers. A friend for a couple of years, totally platonic by the way. And while his back is turned to me for 1 minute, this woman, who I've never spoken to before but see around the office, walks up to me and says, "You have chocolate on your face." And I thought, oh crap, homegirl was looking out. And I asked her where, twice, and she ignored me despite me being right next to her. I was standing by the fountain but hadn't eaten any chocolate, so I pulled my coworker friend over and asked him if I had anything on my face. And he said no, checked a mirror too. She made it obvious the rest of the event that she was into him and wanted me to step aside so she could talk to him. It all felt like such a high school, let me assert my dominance to hide my insecurity bullcrap act. I don't trust people who don't have the self-confidence to command attention or respect without being catty or bringing other people down. When they state something that you know to be false as fact. And the real test is how they react when corrected. If they graciously can accept when they were misinformed in light of a polite correction or evidence to the contrary, then hooray for learning and personal growth. When they double down, then we've got a real problem. Repeatedly not following through, on small things too. Hey, I'll talk to you later this afternoon. Nothing. I've listened to this great song, I'll send it to you. Nothing. I just feel like those little moments are foreshadowing bigger things or disappointments to come. When their opinions on the same topics change depending on who they're with. And I should clarify that I mean this for when people actively have different opinions about the same subjects all in the same day or week. Not enough time to change their mind, and if they change it that often, then it still stands. You have no idea where someone stands if they're constantly changing their mind on things, and therefore I wouldn't trust them. And I don't mean for this to apply to people who are just passively agreeing or not arguing in order to keep the peace with family or in a work situation. I mean, that's just being polite. When they start talking about their essential oils or leggings or makeup or wine businesses. When they openly brag about screwing someone over. It's said so often I'm not worrying about giving it away, but mistreating service people, children, less intelligent people, or animals. When they tell you that all of their exes are crazy. Yeah, I get that one. We're all allowed to call one, maybe two exes in our lives crazy and be given a bit of the benefit of the doubt, even if it's generally a massive oversimplification. But if it's every single relationship, this speaks of either a complete lack of empathy or, much more likely, absolute denial. When I catch them lying about something very small with no consequences if they were to tell the truth. If someone happily tells you that they've cheated on someone before, one of the biggest red flags ever. If I can't sleep around them, must be an enemy. Another red flag is if you can't fast travel around them, and before you meet them, there's a vendor with health potions and a save point. Their phone background is a selfie. My lab partner in Bio's entire camera roll is just pictures of herself. No other people or landscapes, just her. I silently judge her so much for that. When they give non-apologies after doing something wrong, like, I'm sorry to see you feel that way, instead of, I'm sorry I did that, or, that's just the way I am, or, why do you care so much, or, it's not a big deal. I have to say it, but sometimes apologies aren't warranted, and if someone screws me over or does something that tees me off and expects an apology, they can jump in a wood chipper. When they don't turn down the music in the car so they can better see when parking. Clearly a psychopath. When your mistress sends a secret video of your bedroom encounter to your wife. Totally lost my trust at that point. When they're super nice to me, compliments the heck out of me, and want to be best friends right away. It immediately makes me suspicious and I put my guard up. I assume they have ulterior motives and are trying to establish a false rapport with me in order to throw me off their scent. If they're female and say that they don't have any female friends, usually because, quote, women cause drama. This gives me caution because while you aren't going to get along with every woman, if you don't have any female friends at all, you might be the one causing the drama. But someone that actually became my good friend said this once, we became her first female friends. Yeah, if you don't have any female friends, I'm suspicious, but maybe you spend most of your time in male-dominated environments and haven't had a chance to meet a lot of other women in day-to-day life. If you don't have any female friends because women cause drama, screw right off. Trying to change your mind after you say no instead of being respectful and letting the matter drop. When they act like they've known me for years and yet only just met me, I feel like they're going to start selling me something or there's some other sort of angle at brewing. Someone who talks way too much about themselves and their life. If they have a curly mustache and top hats. If they frequently rub their hands together and laugh maniacally after tying a damsel to railroad tracks. And if the word dastardly is a part of their name. When they put a hand on your shoulder, squarely look you in the eye, smiling with a fat grin, and confidently say, trust me. Someone that wears a belt and suspenders. I don't trust someone that doesn't even trust their own pants. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Something about when a person tries too hard to be someone they're obviously not. I've realized some people can pick up on that and some cannot. When they have to keep saying, "Believe me." Not tipping or being mean to customer service. Sexist jokes or racist jokes preceded by, for example, "I'm not racist, but," before they say them. When they litter. I don't know why, but as soon as someone throws a wrapper out the window, I immediately lose all faith in that person. Like, you can hold it for an hour. If you can't hold on to a thing that long, how long will you hold on to what I tell you? When their small reasons for distrusting others are ridiculous. Anyone who'll tell you their IQ number. When they come on really strong seeking my friendship. In my experience, anyone who starts out with intense flattery, saying things like, "Let's be best friends," inevitably turns into a jealous, undermining butthole within months. Healthy people seek friendships with people they like. Unhealthy people pressure you into intense BFFdom, suck up your energy, then belittle and discard you. When they have the Christian Bale American Psycho dead eyes. They're smiling and cheerful, but there's just no light behind those eyes. Those people scare me. Yeah, although on principle I'm against shunning anyone based on their appearance, something about this does really resonate with me. There's a weird way that these people can respond coherently to you, while also seeming that they do not at all give a crap about what you're talking about. Look, if they talk crap about people they appear to be good friends with to you, then they do it about you as well. I'm just going to go ahead and say what everyone else already really knows. You feel that crap down in your gut, and that's all. False equivalencies. After Caitlyn Jenner won Woman of the Year, I had a friend insist some spurious they were going to force doggy effing on us next. What that has to do with transgenderism, I'll never know. When the details of their story change in any way, I automatically distrust everything they've said. I do that a lot, but that's not because I'm lying, but just because I don't have the best memory and I tend to forget or misplace a lot of details. Also, I'm not a good storyteller, so I'll probably mix things up, try to make the story as short as possible, or ramble about a small and unimportant thing in the story. As you can see, those are not the best of combinations. Anyone who feels comfortable enough to start unloading their personal drama shortly after meeting them. I found that's a pretty good foreshadowing for how that relationship will go. I feel instantly creeped out if someone uses my name too often when speaking to me. It's just weird and unnecessary. Once I found out they lie even about simple things. When they say that catapults are the superior siege engine. When their last name is a first name. When they think Christian equals good. He's a good Christian. I don't give a crap. Hitting their dog. The way they treat waitstaff and janitors and other service people. If they treat fellow human beings like trash because they're working a menial job, then they aren't to be trusted. When they emphasize how involved in a religion or church they are. Smoke and mirrors. When they keep saying, "We are friends." When people don't vaccinate their children. People who tell stories differently to different people. Doesn't make me hate you, but I know from that point on that you're pretty frickin' likely to be manipulative. Anyone that has to get very serious or overly intense about an opinion, but then immediately act like it's not a big deal if I say anything even slightly contrary to what they're saying. Being over-the-top crazy about any opinion seems nuts to me, but also shutting down any kind of adversity to it just seems like they're unaccepting of discussion or even questioning their own thoughts. A lot of people see this as very petty, but I honestly think that this is an instant red flag. Having thousands of Facebook friends, Instagram and Twitter followers, where they appear to be more attached about how people see them than how they see themselves. I automatically distrust people who seem to lie about something for no reason whatsoever. A terrible coworker of mine can't be trusted to ever tell the truth. If you ask if they did XYZ, they say yes, knowing full well that someone else did it or that it hasn't been done at all. I just prefer to stick with text traffic with them. People that have naughty words in their username. If within the first 30 minutes of meeting you, you reveal to go to Church X or bring up your religion in any way unprompted, then I automatically put my guard up. If they're trying to get me wasted, much more than they are, every time we meet up to party. Like, don't get me wrong, me and my close friends often do that to each other just for craps and giggles, because we know we can trust each other. But if you're a guy I just met 2 weeks ago and you want me to be crap-faced to the point where I can't remember a thing, I can't help but assume you're not looking for a friend in me. A good friend of mine was once traveling on a train. He was sitting on one of those seats where you sit opposite, facing towards someone. Anywho, he ended up with a very strange-looking guy in front of him. After maybe an hour of travel, the man leans forward to my friend and whispers, "Hey, you see that guy over there?" while nodding in the direction of a man wearing a white shirt. My friend is like, yeah? Don't trust that man. Never trust a person that buttons up all the buttons on a shirt. The strange man then leaned back and didn't speak a single word for the rest of the train ride. From that day, my friend has never trusted a person with all the buttons buttoned on a shirt. In short, never trust people who button all the buttons on a shirt. I want to know that man's reasoning. I will never forgive your friend for not discreetly following them from a safe distance and taking notes on their many baffling pieces of advice. When someone gets offended when they're told that someone doesn't want to interact with them and comes back with, "I just want to get to know you," it makes me distrust them because they clearly have no regard for other people's feelings and won't take no for an answer. I remember one instance where there was a group of 4 of us talking in a local cafe. We saw someone we knew outside walking and we waved. They did not see it as it was too far away, and one person, clearly meant in humor, said, "Are they ignoring us?" Then one person who's generally a misery to be around chirped up at the possibility of something negative and said completely seriously, "Yeah, they are." I only remember being taken aback that the thing that caused that person's mood to lighten was the prospect of discord between others. From then on, anyone who reacts positively, no matter how tiny, to something negative or bad blood between people who are not themselves, I distrust instantly. These people are toxic and not people you want in your daily life. I'm a nice person. If you were, you wouldn't need to bring it up. Someone getting something for me from the store and keeping the, for example, $1 change. I mean, sure, I'd say keep it when you tried giving it back to me anyway, but when you just assume that you can have it, I don't trust you anymore for some reason. Very slight passive-aggressive remarks that can easily be overlooked. The whole sassy witch trend is really getting on my nerves, since so many people confuse it with being straight-up mean or disrespectful to people, including their friends. Seriously, no one's attracted to negativity, and it sure as heck is not going to make me pour my heart out to you if you act like a butthole 90% of the time. Someone skipping a queue for something basic, we're talking bread or groceries. Also, people who are proud of not paying for something, like the train or bus, because they can get away with it. Lack of integrity shows in the small things. Talking over me. It doesn't happen much these days, but during my school days, I sucked at human interaction, so people would usually treat me like I didn't exist or matter in a group conversation. I've contemplated on multiple occasions the possibility of buying a mini whiteboard and marker to keep in my backpack at all times, and when someone starts interrupting me, I go silent and use that instead for the rest of the day for everyone. I did not like being treated like that as a kid. I ain't taking it anymore. In fact, I think I'll order the whiteboard this weekend. You know what? I just don't trust people that don't curse. Responsible firearm owner here. I don't trust people that are obsessed with weapons. If you have an unreasonably large collection, have to have one in every room of your house, carry at least 2 of them wherever you go, you're either obsessed with power, always starting crap, or you're very paranoid. Or just a combo of the 3. There are many folks I know that fit the profile of George Zimmerman, and I don't trust any of those guys that get such a raging obsession for killing tools. Seeing people manage their money improperly and blaming it on society or a third party. A MAGA hat. When they don't wash their hands after using the bathroom. If they don't like dogs or they show cruelty or anger in any way towards animals. A lot of people are rightfully scared of dogs from attacks and other bad experiences. Animals in general, sure, but if someone gets anxious around Rottweilers, it doesn't make them a butthole. If they treat housekeeping, custodians, janitors, maintenance, or garbage men like crap. People who never admit to fault. In my experience, this person will throw anyone under the bus if they have to. Jesus fish on vehicles, advertisements, or signs. Prepare to get screwed. When my dog or cat is unnaturally afraid or spooked by them. When they say they're honest right when you meet them. Fake moral outrage or moral outrage over extremely trivial stuff. When they start most of their sentences with, "Now, I'm not going to lie." It's not necessarily their fault, but if your voice and your way of speaking sounds like that of a stereotypical D-bag, then it's going to take quite a bit to try to convince me that you're not in fact a D-bag. How did a single-race couple react when they delivered a mixed-race baby? I work for a mortgage company, and a prior customer came in to inquire about buying another home. I asked him why, and he replied that after his third deployment overseas, he came home to discover his wife had given birth to a black baby. They are both white. He said he tried to stay with her and work things out. Fast forward 2 years and he returns from his 5th deployment overseas, and she's given birth to another black baby from a man different than the father of the first one. And that time he told her to pound sand and got the F out of there. I worked at a urologist's office for a couple of years in college, where the main appointments for the day were men having a vasectomy. Well, one man came in raging furious because his wife was pregnant, yelling that he wanted his money back because the vasectomy didn't work. Though that can happen, the doctor examined him and concluded that the vasectomy did indeed work. Poor guy left the office so quickly and without a word. You still gotta give him props for going to that conclusion first. I knew one guy who did have a vasectomy fail, as in grew back together. A couple of years after the operation, he almost got divorced because he accused his wife of cheating before he checked with the doctor and found out that his vasectomy had reversed. Oh, this story is too funny not to tell again. They handed my dad a black baby boy when I was born. I was born December 31st during a snowstorm, and needless to say, there wasn't much of a staff, it being a holiday and with terrible weather. I guess things got crazy because after I was born, they took me to clean me off and then handed my dad a little black baby. Needless to say, he was confused. He said there was some cussing before things were figured out. Apparently there was a moment of panic even though he knew the baby was a boy when it was meant to be a girl. Luckily, I was the only little white girl born on that night, so they knew which baby belonged to them and fixed that mess up pretty quickly. I knew a guy in the small town that I grew up in. He was the token white rapper of our group. Not that that's important, it's just funny. Well, he was dating a girl for a really long time. She was also white. She got pregnant. Well, the whole time he had told everyone he was going to be a father, his family, friends, everyone. His family had bought the child clothes and baby beds, and they'd even prepared a place at his mum's house to be the baby's nursery. Well, the day came and the baby popped out black. He claimed he took one look at the kid, turned and walked away, and refused to ever talk to her again. He refused to take her calls, dropped all of her stuff off at her house, and basically never saw her again. I can't imagine the embarrassment, the hurt, and how changed your life is after something like that. I mean, maybe he was just that good at rap. That is simultaneously hilarious and an awful undermining of this poor man's heartbreak. But thank you for making me laugh and guaranteeing my place in hell. I work as a biology professor, and I did Intro to Bio, where I had my students do traits. We're talking about widow's peak, hitchhiker's thumb, stuff like that. So this girl in my class finds out that mum and dad both have 2 recessive traits, and she is dominant for those traits. It was the first time mum had told anyone that dad could have possibly not been their dad. Daughter was 19 and didn't see how that went down, but it was really weird for the girl to describe how she found out dad was not her dad. It took about 300 students for this to be brought to my attention. I don't do this lab anymore. In short, I outed a cheating mum with genetics homework. A white couple delivered an Asian. Twist, it turns out the father was secretly Asian. I was born 27 years ago to a very nice white couple. As the title of this video implies, I came out Asian. Right after the delivery, they take you out back and clean you up while your mum gets comfy in a regular hospital bed. During this little wait, my dad was seething, but he couldn't bring himself to accuse his fiancée of anything after the ordeal that she'd just gone through. So he resigned himself to be all smiles in the hospital, avoiding signing the birth certificate and to bring it up at home. Well, after waiting for an eternity in the hospital room, they bring me in and the doctor says, "I'm sorry, your son has jaundice." At which point my dad leapt into the air and thanked heaven that I was not Asian, I only had liver failure. I was born dark, brown eyes, black hair, and dark skin. Nurses raised a few eyebrows at dad, and when he left the room they pressed mum for the gossip on who the father was. Insisted they wouldn't tell, they just wanted to know. It was a very small country town. She had to show them photos of my equally dark grandparents to show them the coloring was just a throwback from her family. In a university lecture on basic genetics, to illustrate a point about recessive traits carried in certain chromosomes, the professor asked if any girls in the class were colorblind. One puts her hand up and he addresses her, "Now, I can say for a fact that your father is also colorblind, am I right?" No. The rest of the class got it about half a second before she did. I have a male relative that was cheated on by his wife, but it wasn't the baby's race that gave it away. To quote the baby's grandfather, the father of the cheated male, "Ain't no way he's one of our family. His Johnson is too big." Outside verification proved Grandpa correct. The cheated male did end up raising the kid as his own, though. My boyfriend is retired Army. He says there's a lot of cheating that goes on at the bases. Anyway, he told me about a friend of his that was expecting a baby and was in the room the whole delivery. When the baby came out a different color, the guy flew into a rage, and the docs and nurses had to pull him off her. When I gave birth to our middle son, my husband swore up and down that our child was mixed with another race and that the child was not his. I finally convinced him that he was insane, I've never cheated, would never cheat, and that yes, Caleb was his son. 5 years pass, we divorce, and he wants a DNA test. He gets one. Turns out Caleb is his son. Go figure, doofus. My mum's best friend, who's 60 years old, was recently contacted by a man claiming to be her half-brother. Her father had fought in Japan during World War II and had apparently had an affair with a Japanese woman and kept it secret even after he died. She was extremely skeptical, but her and her brother decided to meet this guy anyways. All skepticism went down the drain when her brother's Asian doppelganger walked through the door. My sister worked the OB-GYN. Woman comes in and gives birth to an Asian baby. She's white. Father's white but stupid. He comes in with his whole family, 1 white kid, 2 blackish kids. The nurse and my sister are waiting for him to explode or anything, but he just says, "Look at that, this one's Asian." The mother is looking at the nurses, silently pleading. The man turns to my sister and says, "Ain't life funny? God gave me a whole rainbow." Nurses, doctors, and staff are not allowed to say anything. A friend of mine's sister had a baby which turned out to be black. Boyfriend freaked out, called her every name in the book, and stormed off. When she finally convinced him to do a DNA test, it turns out that it actually was his child. Apparently, they have some distant relatives that it's happened to as well. Very awkward, but I'm pretty sure they ended up back together. I have a part of my family that the rest of the family tries to keep away. One cousin in particular really wants to be African American, even though my family, including him, are all very much white. He dated a real sleazeball of a white girl, and after a few months, she got pregnant. Fast forward 9 months later, and I received a phone call from my mum, dying with laughter, when my cousin's baby came out and was mixed, implying one thing and one thing only coming from 2 white parents. Well, my idiotic cousin thinks nothing of it, and is to this day, 5 years later, raising the kid as his own. It's a joke in the family now that having a mixed baby is a personal achievement of his. He acted black enough to make a mixed baby. Job well done, Derek. Am I the only one reading all of these stories and wondering about all the cases where the cheating was intra-racial and the dad never found out? My mum is a nurse in labor and delivery. She had a patient one time say if the baby was black, please put it up for adoption and tell the husband, who's not in the room, that the kid didn't make it. The baby ended up being white. Not sure what the staff would have done otherwise. There's a family in Kentucky that has a genetic disorder that makes some of them appear blue. One woman was so dark she was almost purple. It used to be incurable, although it didn't cause any problems other than blue-colored skin. But it no longer is, so people who have it take medicine and look normal. The family name is Fugate. Anyway, a baby was born in the hospital in Lexington, Kentucky in the 1970s and was dark blue. Freaked everyone in the family and on the hospital staff out, except the grandmother. She just laughed and said, "My mother was a Fugate," as though everyone would understand. Okay, and one quick Google later I can see that this is both true and one of the weirder quirks of genetics that I've ever seen. And unlike a lot of the others, it's not one that I've seen coming up much elsewhere in the world. We've not had many human smurfs here in Europe that I've ever heard of. Must be a 1,000,000,000 super recessive gene. I went to school with a kid who was born dark brown to 2 white parents. It's due to a skin pigmentation disorder, but the running joke in his family is that his mother was sleeping around. They all think it's incredibly funny. I'm impressed by their collective sense of humor, to be honest. My brother-in-law is half white, half black. My sister is white. They have 2 kids. One looks black and one looks white. They're always telling us about the weird looks they get when they go out. When someone does have the stones to ask, they almost never believe them when they tell them that they're both their biological kids. I have 2 sons. I'm their biological mum and they have the same father. I'm half white, half black, and their dad is half white, half Asian. One is tan, think Hispanic or Middle Eastern, with brown hair, brown wide eyes, and the other one is pale, jet black hair, and hazel Asian-looking eyes. The kicker is their dad is a fraternal twin. My oldest looks just like his dad, and like me, and the youngest looks like his dad's twin, and my father. Yeah, there's lots of what the frick when I take these kids out. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have a cousin who has 2 white kids and 1 black kid. After many consultations and tests, the root cause of this condition was determined to be repeated consensual exposure to a black gentleman. Just wanted to add that her parents were, "I buy my uniforms at the white sale at Sears" kind of racist. They love the kid though. It made them rethink their position on race. Knew a guy whose fiancée cheated on him during their honeymoon. Anyway, kids were on the way and she ends up giving birth to triplets, all of them dark with afro hair. She and he were both white. Guy took it pretty hard, but he always wanted kids, so he put up with it, and eventually the witch left him for the guy she cheated with. He kept the kids, put them through school, loves them more than any father I've ever seen. They don't for a second think of anyone else as their dad. Well, a few years down the road, he started to have some mental issues, and well, long story short, he ended up fighting his split personality over a girl he was escorting in the witness protection program. The kids stole a helicopter and went to rescue him. What? Me, myself, and Irene. Well played, sir. My mum is a midwife and postnatal caretaker that witnessed this once. A woman was home birthing. She was a blonde lady with blue eyes, and her husband was blonde-haired and blue-eyed as well. She gave birth to a mixed-race baby and immediately tore down in cries and panic and pretty much confessed on the spot to what she had done. Husband stayed calm and composed, went outside, went to his lawyers to sort out the divorce, went to the housing agency to stop the rent, called a moving company to take all of his stuff out and basically dropped her from his life, and pretty much made her homeless in the process. She had to stay with friends afterwards. Now, imagine my mum is still caring for the woman and her child for about a week and sees all of this drama go down in front of her eyes. Apparently, the apartment was fully in the name of the husband and they had a strong prenup contract. She witnessed the house being emptied to the bare minimum, like bed, couch, dinner table, and some baby stuff, all without ever seeing the husband again. Mostly friends of the husband assisting him. Wife went into postnatal depression for quite some time. My mum checked up on her sometime later, about a year in. She does this as a standard because she cares. The woman had her child taken away because she couldn't care for it and was living in a women's community under supervision. And I would have done the same as the husband. Women, if you cheat, make sure not to mess up like that. And on that note, as a man, I would do a DNA test on the baby in the first week to determine paternity. I'm a bit of a butthole like that. My wife knows this fully, and I doubt she'll ever cross the path of her own destruction. Actually, that's not a bit of a butthole move, that's a huge butthole move. Someone trusts you enough to marry you and start a life with you, and you don't trust them not to cheat? One of the biggest butthole comments I've read on the internet in a while. Congratulations, jerk. I wasn't there at birth because I'm about the same age as the kids, but there were twins at the high school I went to that were gingers, and their parents were both black. Turns out they both carry recessive genes or something. The family picture is pretty funny because at first you see a jacked black man and a pretty fit black woman, and in front of them, 2 small ginger kids. A little off topic, but this reminds me of a small girl I recently saw, probably about 4, who was black but had the most gorgeous red curly hair. I'm talking like Christina Hendricks red. Even her eyelashes were bright red. She was incredible. Her parents were an average-looking black couple. I couldn't stop staring at how beautiful she was. I hope she grows up to be a model. Yes, I'm creepy. Moral of today's story? Only cheat on your husband with other guys of the same race. Then you're fine. This is unfortunately the advice my mother's given me and all my sisters. Okay, well today I learned your mother is a C-word. Most babies are red when they first come out. They don't really darken up until a day or 2 after if they're mixed white and black. My sister has a mixed daughter. We knew she was mixed, there was nothing surprising there. But she was just red until she actually brought her home 2 days later. For the record, having a baby that's a different race than the parents isn't always a sign of cheating. Black parents sometimes give birth to white babies, although the chances are kind of insane. So when I was in the 6th grade, my cousin was dating this guy, who we'll call Derp for the sake of the story. Anyway, my cousin and Derp got engaged, and my cousin was pregnant with his child. My cousin and Derp are both white. Anyway, fast forward 9 months, and they're having a get-together for the family to meet the new baby. I walk in and spot this dark-skinned little baby. Not just a little dark, mind you, this baby is black, as in not white. I'm kinda confused because everyone seems to not give an F about this. Mind you, I had zero racist thoughts, as a black baby is just as good as a white baby in my book. I just thought it was weird that no one was acting awkward towards my cousin for her obvious infidelity. So I go and whisper in my mum's ear, "Mom, why is that baby black? Did my cousin cheat on Derp?" And that's when I got the bombshell. Derp was black, except he was albino. I'd never even considered such a thing. So it was his child after all. My family still laughs about the story sometimes. In short, my cousin gave birth to a black baby. I thought she'd cheated on her fiancé, and turns out he was an albino black man. Well, you were quite young. From the limited sample of albino black guys I've seen, I'd say that most people would have worked it out past a certain age. Good thing you whispered and didn't yell. The most common answer, from what I can tell, is that a baby of different race than the parents isn't always a sign of cheating, as it's entirely possible for two faithful same-race parents to give birth to a child of a different race than the parents appear to be. Aside from that, the surprising few amount of comments indicating that a birth had actually been the result of an unfaithful wife result in a huge amount of drama. I remember reading many where the guy simply raised the child as his own. However, there are always a few gems, it seems, true stories or not, where hilarity ensues. A semi-related story from an acquaintance in med school. Laboring mother only speaks Spanish. Overconfident resident claims, "I speak Spanish," and begins talking to her in barely passable Spanish. A few minutes later, he starts telling her to push, but instead of empuje, he starts yelling, "Puta, puta," which is Spanish for working girl. Lots of tears came out, and then a baby. The first thing I thought of when reading this was King of the Hill and the whole thing with Joseph and John Redcorn. I heard this one from a friend. Her friend was born white and both of her parents are black. Father stormed off and left, accusing the mother of cheating. Never returned back. She was an albino. Very white cousin's girlfriend gave birth to a black baby while they were dating. Big surprise to him because they hadn't even slept together yet. He noped out of there real quick. Reminds me of the time a panda bear almost escaped from its habitat at a zoo I went to the other day. Everyone had to evacuate the zoo in case other animals got out, and zookeepers rushed to get the panda to safety. It almost started eating left-behind food, which would have been disastrous. All animals and people were okay in the end, though. What the frick? I have a friend who's black, but both of his parents are white. I always assumed he was adopted, but the story is much better than that. Turns out they're his natural parents and no cheating happened. When he was born, his mum was as surprised as his dad was furious. He walked out in a rage, but his mum insisted on a paternity test to prove that she'd been faithful. Turns out he had a black ancestor on his mother's side, but she didn't know about it until she did some research. The black gene just decided to express itself. And he doesn't look white with dark skin, he looks really black, with a natural fro and everything. Any geneticists out there care to elaborate on how this could happen? It doesn't always mean cheating. If one of the parents is mixed but looks single race, then they might have a kid who looks different than they do. This is a cheating story, not a mixed-race baby story. I was working in the ER one day and we had this guy come in via ambulance with his girlfriend and her family. I checked them in, thought nothing of it. 20 minutes later, his wife and her family come in. First words when I hear that his wife wants to see him are, "Oh boy." The waiting room actually became akin to a war zone. We had our entire security staff in there to keep them apart after the first couple of fights broke out, and then the guy says that he wants his girlfriend with him and no one else. Needless to say, it was an entertaining day. My teacher read this over my shoulder and said, "Oh, of course they blame the wife. Why couldn't it have been the husband?" And she was dead serious too. Ugh, this woman's educating me. There was a white couple who already knew the child was going to be black, because the woman had been with a black man before they were dating. They were planning on making a big deal about it in front of the hospital staff as a practical joke. So recently single me goes to visit a good friend and his wife for a weekend of boozing and hanging out on the water and at the beach to get over the sadness of my being recently singled. Being the best of hosts, it turns out that this involved a little three-way fun with his very willing wife. So we carried on through the weekend, enjoying all manner of fun stuff together. Kept it wrapped up the whole time. I then get a message a week later from him indicating that they're expecting. Even though we played it safe, it was a tense 9 months to make sure the baby did not resemble me in any way. Unfortunately for all of us, it didn't. My buddy was in the military and his wife delivered their first child. The doctor ran a test on the baby to determine the baby's blood type. The baby's blood type came back and my friend double-checked his dog tags. He asked the doctor if it was possible that the child was his based on blood type. The doctor said no. He starts to fume and the wife gets upset. Then the doctor says, "Hold on," and retests my buddy's blood type. It was wrong on his dog tags. The docs say that error is extremely common. Good thing he never needed a transfusion. What did someone say to a cop that immediately incriminated them? My father was a cop for many years, and one of his favorite arrest stories was when he pulled someone over for simple traffic violation. I think the guy in question didn't do a full stop for a stop sign. When my father asked, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" the gentleman responded, Yeah, it's because of all the substances in my trunk." After my father read him his rights and was putting him in the back of his car, my dad asked, "Just out of curiosity, how did you know I knew you had substances in the back?" The man ushered to the radar detector in the front and said, "I saw the substances detector on the dash and I knew you had me." My father still laughs about this one 20 years later. I was sitting in my patrol car watching cars drive by one night, and I see a 4-door car drive by and see it has a tail light out. Now, usually I just stop the vehicle and let them know that it just needs to be fixed. So I turn on the old cherries and berries. We go through procedure. "Hey, I'm Officer Corb with the police department. Do you know the reason I'm stopping you?" Is it because I'm wasted?" I was very taken by surprise. "Why don't you go ahead and step out of the car for me?" I'm not a police officer, but I got pulled over, and I thought it was because of an illegal U-turn I did. And as the cop goes, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I sheepishly responded, "It's because I did an illegal U-turn." He kind of just stared for a moment and switched on my headlights and said, "Your headlights are off, and stop doing illegal U-turns." Oh, I'm the idiot in this situation. Being apologetic by nature, when I got pulled over for rolling through a stop sign, I said, "I'm so sorry, officer, I do it all the time." Man was beaten unconscious by 3 men. I caught one of them escaping on foot, but he vigorously denied any knowledge of the incident. Another officer, who had collared someone he thought might also be involved, unfortunately had little evidence other than the fact that the guy was running away and he couldn't really account for his presence. The other prisoner was being taken to a cell just as I walked into custody with mine. My prisoner looked at the other one and immediately yelled, Matt's got nothing to do with this, you should let him go, he wasn't even there." A+ for friend loyalty, C- for avoiding self-incrimination. I guess his only crime was being too good of a friend. And the beatings, of course. There was that, wasn't there? If he can just wean off that second nasty habit, this guy is set with good pals for life. Once pulled a woman over for speeding. Upon approaching the car, I noticed she has 4 young children in there and that none of them are secured in their seats, even though there are 3 car seats in the back. So I explain why she was stopped and I inquire as to why none of the kids are belted in. Her response was, "I don't have time for that crap." "Yes, Mom, I'll be right back with you." Went back to my unit and ran her, noting that she had received a ticket the previous year for the same thing, just with 1 child. Roger that. Wrote her 1 for speeding and 4 for the unsecured kids, totaling $900 in fines. If she said they'd unlatched to see the policeman or something other like a reasonable excuse and then had them buckle up, I probably would have let her go with a warning. Buckle your frickin' kids in. Pulled over a guy on suspicion of drink driving. We didn't have an ESD, or breathalyzer, but he was so drunk he was adamant that my radio was a breathalyzer. Anyway, while we were waiting, he started to get really agitated as he thought we were up to something. He was begging to have a go on the breathalyzer, the radio, and eventually I let him blow into the radio antenna and told him it was faulty and we had to wait for another. Unsurprisingly, he failed and got arrested. It still makes me chuckle. When I was a teacher, I stood with Officer S, the school police officer, in the morning out near the bus lanes to greet students. One morning, a mum drove up to drop her child off, rolled down the passenger side window and called out to Officer S, "If you get a call about a break-in on Smith Street, don't worry, it was just me." She then proceeded to roll up the window and try to drive away while he ran after her shouting, "Excuse me, ma'am, I need to talk to you," and I just laughed my butt off. I had someone drunkenly confess to me that they'd witnessed a murder and knew where the murder weapon was ditched. I passed the info along to the investigating detectives. They already had a suspect, but the new witness helped secure a confession. Ooh, I've got 2 for you. The first was a suspicious person behind a business that had been burglarized a bunch of times in the past. I asked him, "What's your name?" "Jonathan." "Okay, how do you spell that?" "Jothnathan." And he sighs. "My name is Robert Paulson and I've got a warrant." The second was a traffic stop. The driver was in tears, begging me not to give him a speeding ticket, since he was going to have his license suspended. So I said, "Tell you what, if you've got any information about something more serious than this ticket, I'll give you a warning." "Oh, a couple of buddies and I broke into a bunch of cars by Main Street." "You've got to be kidding me." "I swear, all the stuff we took is at my friend's house." Turns out the driver was part of a group that was going through cars that were unlocked. We ended up arresting 4 people, 2 adults, 18 years old each, and 2 juveniles. They all went to jail for a few years, but I kept my promise and did not give the driver a ticket. Late to the party, but here's one of many. I pulled over a woman for speeding one night, 45 miles-ish per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone on a gorgeous spring night with pedestrians everywhere. When I asked her if she knew she was speeding, she said that she did. She was having brake problems and was rushing to get the car to her friend's shop. The regret was obvious when I pointed out that if her brakes didn't work correctly, perhaps slower would have been the better option. In my state, driving with a suspended license is a non-criminal traffic offense. However, knowingly driving with a suspended license is a criminal traffic offense. More often than not, when I pull someone over with a suspended license, they always start out by saying something along the lines of, "Look, I know my license is suspended, but…" Not a cop, just a dumb kid. In '99, after Phantom Menace came out, I thought Jar Jar Binks had the funniest way of talking. My family and I spent part of the summer in Mexico visiting family. On our way back at the border, the cops there asked each of us kids if we were American citizens, and everyone says yes except me. I said something along the lines of, "Misa American," all exaggerated because I thought it was funny. We ended up sitting on the side of the road in 100-something degree heat while they tore apart everything packed in the back of the truck. My mum was sitting with all 4 of us girls and holding my 6-month-old brother and pinching the crap out of the back of my arm. I still flinch when people touch the back of my arm. In short, I spoke like Jar Jar Binks at the border to be funny when I was 7, and still regret it nearly 20 years later. My mother is a police officer. She once stopped a woman who was on her phone while driving and had no seatbelt on to boot. She said they were on the lookout for people who weren't buckled in. The lady tried to buckle herself in, instead threw her phone out the window and didn't manage to buckle herself in either. Yeah, once again, this is the narrator trying to do literally any multitask under pressure. Definitely yet another reason for me to stay away from dat thug life that's been calling to me lately. You know, it's pretty common for people to openly admit to driving 10 miles per hour over the speed limit because they think that 10 over is acceptable. It's also common that they don't know the speed limit, so they'll admit to going 45 in what they think is a 35, but it's actually a 25. Your best strategy is just to be polite and play dumb. True, there's a road that I use every day. It's 40 miles per hour everywhere except this one little half-mile stretch near a golf club and ultra-rich houses. Then it's a 30 zone. A couple of weeks after starting my new job, I was going down that road and I got pulled over. The cop says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Is there something wrong with my lights?" "I clocked you going 42 miles per hour. "You pulled me over for going 2 over the limit?" "It's a 30 zone here." I seriously had never seen the sign. For some reason, he let me off with a warning. It was clearly some kind of trap because they were pulling over almost every car that went by. Probably going for DUIs, and I wasn't worth their time. I got pulled over walking home from the bar pretty trashed, and after the cop searched me, he said, "So, do you have any warrants?" I said, "I don't know. Do I?" It's better than me. I got tackled by a cop out of nowhere. Called back up, so I had 4 of them surrounding me. The guy tells me, "You have a warrant." No, I didn't have a frickin' warrant. I knew a kid who was arrested after pointing a gat at the police after they stopped him because they got a call about car prowlers. When he tried to run away, he slipped and fell, so they caught him. When the police officer was telling the other officers that this guy was trying to shoot at him, he said, "I forgot to take the safety off." He basically just admitted to attempted murder of a police officer and was sentenced to 13 years in prison at the ripe old age of 17. My friend apologized for not drinking after the cop asked her if she'd had anything that night. What was she worried about? "How can I help you, officer? Have you had anything to drink tonight?" "No, sir." Leans into radio. "Dispatch, we've got a frickin' nerd." My brother was caught with a decent amount of green herb in middle school. He told the officer, "I wasn't going to smoke it, I was just going to sell it." This was now a distribution charge instead of simple possession. He was never actually charged with anything though. I guess the officer didn't want to charge a 12 or 13-year-old kid with Mary J charges, in addition to feeling bad about his stupidity. There's a lot of good officers out there, and he's one of them. My brother's actually an intelligent person. He just hasn't made the best decisions with his life, and at that age, he definitely wasn't quick on his feet. As I was handcuffing a guy after a felony car stop for a stolen car, he looks around, sees all the cop cars and the helicopter, and says to me, "All of this for a GTA? Why, thank you, sir. Now I don't have to interview you." I pulled over a guy for some minor traffic offenses who I knew had a twin brother. He gave me his name, let's say Jeff. I decided to check the other twin's name as well. Boom, warrant. I knew he was bullcrapping me, but I couldn't prove it. I chit-chatted casually for a few minutes and then asked him, "So what's Jeff up to these days?" He answered and started telling me, and I said, "But I thought you were Jeff." He didn't even try to get out of it at that point, admitted he wasn't the real Jeff, and went to jail. The annoying thing is, I later fell for this with another set of brothers and had to go back and arrest the kid the next day after he totally got the better of me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, close enough. A friend of mine is a cop, and the first time he pulled anyone over, it was a couple of teenagers in the car. My buddy says to them jokingly, "All right, guys, where were you hiding the Mary J?" They were instantly terrified, so they opened the middle console and handed him an 1/8 ounce of green herb. He couldn't believe it and said he honestly felt really bad because at that point he had no choice but to write them up. Okay, not police, but my significant other nearly got me interrogated. A police officer was canvassing the area regarding a recent attack and robbery a few hundred feet away from our house. He was giving a description of the suspect, tall, slim, light hair, and she goes, "Ha ha, sounds like my boyfriend." I was listening in the kitchen and almost dropped the lasagna. Pulled over a car because I was 99% sure she was texting. I get to the window and her phone is on the passenger seat with iMessage open. "Hi, do you know what the speed limits are on this stretch of road?" "Yeah, 30 miles per hour. "Okay, and how fast do you think you were going?" "I don't know. I was on my phone." There was a shooting in my town. Apparently the perpetrator was arrested and has been in the county jail for 2 weeks. He's made over 200 calls and has confessed to the crime in 3 of them. I'm assuming all the substances he's taken have caused permanent brain damage. My girlfriend was going through customs one time, and when the security guy asked her if she was carrying anything, she responded with, "Just my explosive personality," followed by finger pistols and a wink. This set of actions was immediately regretted. Crossing the US border to Canada with a friend. The officer goes, "Any drugs or weapons in the back?" "Just this dope next to me," points to me, and they tore our car up. "Good joke, bud." Oof. So yeah, I'd say that this was only a light to moderate chance of your perfectly harmless jokes inflaming people this way, but it's still not worth risking, is it? I salute you though, especially on the finger pistols in that first story. Well, I was the stupid person in my story. I got pulled over because one of my headlights was out, and I responded with, "Oh yeah, I know that, but if I just hit it with my scraper, it comes back on." I think the only reason I didn't get a ticket was because it was such a stupid response. I was passing a friend, being an idiot on a 4-lane road. Out of nowhere, this other car jumped out in front of me and caused me to have to floor it and swerve over into the other lane and past the guy who'd pulled out, narrowly avoiding clipping my friend's car who wasn't as attentive to what was going on as I was. I saw the cop driving the opposite way, but didn't even get to hesitate and still pulled off the timing I needed to. The cop stops, turns around in the middle of the road and turns on his lights. I saw him turn and was already pulled over before he'd even turned the lights on. I was then parked at a gas station. He says, "What were you doing?" "I was trying to avoid a collision, sir." "You were driving recklessly. Don't give me that bullcrap." "Sir, if I'd not swerved, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. That other car absolutely pulled out in front of me without checking." Well, I can't say for sure what happened because I didn't see it, but I don't ever want to see you driving like that again." And then somewhere in my brain, the next logical thing for me to say was, "Well, I was speeding." "What the frick did you just say?" was my reaction to myself. The cop, completely perplexed by my confession, looked at me with his head cocked to one side, not unlike a dog that's trying to figure out what the baby talk noises you're making are supposed to mean. He then turned around, sat down in his cruiser, and drove away. I then sat there staring blankly out the window, with people walking past me going into the station, and I could only put my head down on the steering wheel like the moron that I am. I was walking home at 2 a.m. a few years ago, about 15 minutes away from my place, when a cop came up behind me in a cruiser, crossed into the opposite lane just to pull me over. I was walking on the sidewalk. The whole thing actually made me laugh because out of the corner of my eye I saw the flashing lights. Heard the siren and saw this cop haul butt across the street to pull me over. When he rolled down the window to get my attention, I asked, "Sorry, officer, was I speeding?" He did not find that funny. He didn't detain me, though, but considering he'd found a reason to pull me over, it was probably a slow night and I was the only living soul he'd seen in the past 15 minutes, I wanted to make sure he was the one who decided the conversation was over. I had nothing on me, I hadn't been drinking, and I did nothing wrong. If some of you are thinking I still should have been worried, this happened in Ontario, Canada. When he pulled me over, he asked me what I was doing. I was walking back from my girlfriend's. My car was in the shop that week. The cop started trying to poke holes in my story, asking about whereabouts does she live, saying he didn't believe me that I could walk that far. My only hope at this point was to be so friendly with my answers that he'd get bored and drive away. It was February, and I'm sure he was cold sitting there with his window open. I told him the transit system around here was crap, and I was used to walking these distances. He didn't buy it, but moved on with the conversation. He went through the routine, asking me my name, where I lived, stuff like that. I gave him everything he needed. He then asked me what I did for a living. I'd just gotten out of film school and just did some crappy PA work at the time, so I told him, "Oh, so you're in the film business. You must have white snow on you then." What? This is when he kept asking about white snow. Did I have any on me? Did I know people who did it? What my substance connections were? I bet a lot of people do that stuff in the film business. He was trying to see if I'd slip up and say the wrong thing. All I could say was, "I think you watch too many movies." He didn't like that answer, but he hadn't detained me. We're just having a conversation. The cop continued to stare at me before saying, "So you love Tim Hortons?" I was confused by this, and he could probably tell. He then pointed to my winter hat. I was literally wearing one of those stupid promotional hats that Tim Hortons gave away at the time. It wasn't even mine. It was my girlfriend's. It had randomly started snowing that night, and she didn't want my head to be cold, so she gave it to me to wear. I honestly thought it was just a black hat. I had no idea it said anything. This is where we hit the 30-minute mark, so I said to the cop, "Hey, if you really want to search me, you can. I can even show you my ID again. It's really cold and I just want to get home tonight." He stared at me for a good minute. He had that face that kids usually get when they're told to stop doing something annoying, and that they know they should stop, but they want to let you know they're not stopping because you told them to. It's because they want to stop on their own. Then he rolled up the window and drove off. He'd kept me for 30 minutes, in the cold, just going off at me. He kept asking me if I had white snow on me or knew how easily to get it. So either he was desperate to bust me for something at that point, or he just wanted to buy stuff himself. Seems like a very awkward conversationalist. I wonder if he was really just that bad at talking to people so that everything he said or reacted with seemed incriminating. I've actually talked to people like that. Or maybe he was playing a weird prank. I used to intern for a prosecutor. We had one case where we had the officer's report for the DUI. After completing and passing the field sobriety test, the guy told the officer, "Oh good, I thought you were going to ask me to say the alphabet backwards. I can't even do that sober." We kept a copy of that report in the office for later laughs. I work in emergency medical services, so I'm often on scene with the police. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people ask, "Am I going to get a DUI?" I mean, that's like the only way you get a DUI for sure. I never touched a screw. He was suspected of an attempted burglary where the MO was unscrewing a bunch of bolts to loosen a steel security gate. I hadn't told him anything about screws, just said he was detained on suspicion of attempted burglary. He also went, "Why don't we go over there and have a look then?" pointing towards the fresh crime scene. I hadn't quite got around to telling him where the attempt had taken place. Oh, and to top it off, he tried to drop a pair of yellow rubber gloves, the washing up kind, without us noticing. Most cliché, "I'm trying to be sneaky" body language ever. Like something out of a kid's cartoon. Not me, but my brother is a cop. He once told me he had responded to a domestic disturbance call. He got to the scene and separated the couple, and upon patting down the girl, she proceeds to tell him that she has H in her back pocket, but was adamant that it's her sister's. The boyfriend then told my brother that that was absolutely the truth, because his girlfriend only does crystal, and that stuff is in her other pair of pants on the floor. Apparently the girl's sister had left her pants behind earlier in the day when she came by to do laundry. The first time I was pulled over, the officer asked me for my license and insurance. I'd never been in that situation before, so I didn't know what he was talking about, and I handed him my health insurance card. I had no idea why he laughed, and he asked if I'd been drinking. One fine evening, I pulled over a 40-plus-year-old man on a scooter. I asked him, "Am I going to find anything illegal under that seat?" And he says, "Well, nothing that belongs to me." I once thanked a police officer for giving me a speeding ticket. I'm not quite a police officer, but I was a guard at a jail. A man came in, and I told him to place his hands on the wall for a pat down. He immediately said, "The substances in my sock aren't mine." Survivors. What does it feel like to take a bullet? I used to live in a really crappy part of Chicago. One night, coming home from work, I got mugged. It wasn't my first time. The guy asked for my wallet and phone. I gave them up without hesitation. Then he pointed his piece at me and pulled the trigger. Shot me in the chest. Blacked out immediately and had some sharp pains when I woke up in the hospital. Caught the guy a few months later when he shot and ended an old man whose house he'd broken into. I got shot in the side by a negligent discharge at the range. It was a complete accident. The guy even came to the hospital and paid all of the fees. Anyways, the bullet entered my left side and exited about 3 inches to the right. So it wasn't deep, it just hit tissue. It stung for a bit, and then adrenaline kicked in, and I rushed for the quick clot I keep in my center console. It made the stinging worse, but was able to stop the bleeding while waiting for the EMTs. Some people are asking, why quick clot? That's bad for you. For how much it was bleeding for not hitting a blood vessel, and the lack of information I had, being the situation I was in, it was my go-to. I know that it's meant to be a last resort, but I'm sure that if you had it, you would panic and use it too if you were shot. I caught one in the face one time by a thug attempting to rob me in 2008. My son, who was 7 at the time, and I were coming home late from visiting family. I let him out of the car at our front door so that he could go inside and use the bathroom, and I was about to drive around back to park the car when I noticed an old junker car idling in the street at the entrance to our driveway. I knew something wasn't right. I parked the car and ran up to catch my son at the front door. As I got there, a man with a weapon pointed at us came up from the side of our house. He told me to show me the money, but I was speechless. My son was frantically trying to open the door, and my husband inside heard the commotion and came out. As soon as he saw what was happening, he pushed open our heavy iron door into the guy, knocking him backwards. The guy fired, we believe at my husband, but hitting me in the face as he ran off. Luckily, our neighbor had already called the cops, and they arrived quickly. I didn't even realize I'd been shot in the face because the only real pain I felt was from the exit wound behind my ear. It was an excruciating, burning sensation, but what I remember most was the horrifying feeling of the hot blood pouring out of my mouth and down my back. I absolutely thought I was going to die, but I never actually lost consciousness until I went into surgery at the hospital. Lots of blood loss and long recovery, but no residual physical damage, really. The scar on my nose is hardly noticeable now, and the scar behind my ear stays covered by my hair most of the time, so I don't really think about it. Also, I was pregnant at the time all of this happened, and my second son was born a few months later perfectly healthy. Pretty crazy stuff. Thank you. And the scumbag moron might have never been caught, but he was bragging to some people in jail, where he got picked up for doing something similar to another woman a few weeks later, about how hard he was because he shot some white B-word in front of her kid. Oof, I knew that there'd be some really hardened and awful people here, but bragging that you shot down a mother in front of her child is just such an absolutely cartoonish level of evil that I don't think exists outside of complete psychopaths or people so terrified of their surroundings that they feel like that reputation might protect them. Horrifying. A stray round from a drive-by in my area hit me to the left of my navel while I was changing a light bulb. Felt like someone poked me really hard, and then it burned like all hell. I walked to the bathroom and looked at it in the mirror. Being a firearm enthusiast and a nurse, I immediately knew what it was and called 911. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. That was until I bent over to get the first aid kit from under my sink. The pain was a stabbing, burning pain, and I guess I tore something because blood started pouring out. Managed to stop the bleeding and wait for the paramedics. A friend of mine was in Vietnam and served as a medic. He was in one of the largest battles of the war when he got shot. Somewhere in the jungle, and there were several hundred combatants involved. He was rushing all over the place in between trees, trying to bandage guys up and handing out morphine. As he was tending to one guy, a Viet Cong fighter popped up, literally right in front of him, and shot him in the forehead. He said he didn't even feel it happen. He grabbed the weapon of the soldier he was helping and shot the Viet Cong guy in the chest, killing him. I'm guessing the Viet Cong was a little slow to fire again. Most people would be a little shocked to see a guy with a quarter of his skull blown away still moving. He said a few seconds later, after the massive adrenaline rush began to wear off, his head felt like it was on fire, and then he passed out from the pain, blood loss, and the fact that his brain was exposed to the air. Remarkably, he suffered very little permanent brain damage, and today he has a really cool action hero star and war story to boot. If they ever put a scene like this in a movie, it'd get laughed out of the theater for being unrealistic. I got shot in the leg while working once. I was a bounty hunter at the time. And to be quite honest, I didn't feel it initially. Aside from unnatural pressure, I didn't even know I'd been hit. After my adrenaline died down, it was a burning, throbbing pain. I didn't enjoy it, but it wasn't going to kill me. Getting it removed wasn't that bad either. Morphine is one hell of a med. Now, being stabbed is the single most painful experience I've ever had. Not fun. I was hit 2 times in the back and once in the arm in Afghanistan. I was only conscious for about 7 minutes, if that. I felt pain pretty much the entire time I was awake. But as the minutes passed, it was starting to go away and I kept falling asleep or passing out. Just kept putting my head down and closing my eyes because it felt so good. It's really hard to describe the pain. I felt frozen on the ground and couldn't move or breathe well at all. It felt like my guts had been ripped apart and pulled out of my body. I was thinking for sure I was going to die. The pain, the blood, and the screaming around me. I was also sure the guy was going to finish me off, like walk up to me and dome me later. I found out he actually did walk over me but was distracted by others firing at him. Here is basically what my mind was going through. Minute 1 to 2, holy crap, I've been freaking shot. Help me, I don't want to die. I was trying to scream during this whole time. Then minutes 2 to 4, please, if there's a God, let me be accepted into heaven. I didn't want to just die, to become nothing and go into blackness as I was seeing. It really scared me into wanting there to be an afterlife. Minutes 4 through 6, I just want to go to sleep and end this. I've accepted my death. My family, my friends, I love them so much. Minute 4 to 6 was happening while I was going in and out of consciousness, by the way. My squad leader was slapping my face, trying to keep me up. He's also the one that mainly took down my assailant. They then picked me up and ran with me somewhere, and my last memory was hearing a rotor of a Black Hawk. Next thing I knew, I woke up at Walter Reed a week later, confused as heck, thinking I was captured. Yep, I'm in the US Army and I was shot by an Afghan National Army soldier on the FOB we share with them. I lost a very good friend that day as well, who I watched get shot right in front of my eyes, before I was then hit myself. There's a few articles of the incident if anyone cares to read. In short, got hit, it hurt like a witch, and I thought I was dead for sure. Somehow lived to tell the story. It's very disorganized because when I talk about it, I just seem to remember everything at once. Well, it's happened to me on 3 separate occasions, and all 3 felt different. The first time, I was hit in the back of the arm with a small caliber weapon, a .25 ACP. That was when I was a teenager. It burned like holy hell, but more so, the psychological shock made me become weak and lose all coordination. The second time was a shotty blast to the small of my back, butt, and thighs, with a mixture of birdshot and rock salt from a decent distance away. I didn't notice at first, it was like a big push. The problem is that birdshot and rock salt are both too small of a particulate to be removed. You have to wait until the salt dissolves and the birdshot has to work its own way out of your flesh like little pimples that spit metal when you pop them. So that sucked. The last time was a .45 to the face. I only caught the jacket and some other shrapnel, but holy heck did it do a number on my mouth. I still have a hard time saying F's or P's correctly anymore because of the damage and the shrapnel left behind in my lower lip. That one felt like being punched in the face by a big, fat bouncer. All in all, I think being stabbed hurts worse. I'd rather be shot if I had the choice. Pro tip for walking through a sketchy neighborhood: take an empty cup, like the one you'd get for fountain drinks, and put your phone and wallet in there. Then put a straw through the lid. Put something small like a $10 bill in your pocket. In the event you get mugged, you run your pockets and give them the $10, and chances are they pay no attention to your stupid soda. It hurts like a motherfricker, especially when you're running, as said by my dad. He also said that even with a bulletproof vest, it still frickin' hurts. Thank you, Bulletproof Vest, for saving my dad. Yep, all you're really doing there is spreading the force over a wider area, although I guess that's a very silly use of the word only, isn't it? Only saving your life is a very big only. But yes, if the vest works, you're basically choosing to take a sledgehammer hit instead of, well, a bullet, and that is the right choice. I got an in and out through the shoulder in Afghanistan. It didn't really hurt because I just got hit by an RPG shrapnel blast as well. For me, anyway, I didn't really think I was going to die. I thought I'd lost my leg, and for some reason that freaked me out way more. I didn't really think about it much after I realized I hadn't lost it. I mean, pain-wise. A lot of other guys were hit a lot worse or dead, so I guess my head was occupied. That crap just stopped working, though. I mean my right leg and left wrist. I don't really remember pain at the time, but I mean 7 or 8 guys had just lost their lives at the OP, so getting hit again was a very real possibility. Me and another guy managed to crawl out, though, after another group came up to reinforce, and I hopped to a medevac with some help. It frickin' hurt like heck later on, though, but I had meds by that point. Unfortunately, if you want to get out of the hospital, you've got to be off the IV meds, so I did stop those ASAP. So I mean it frickin' hurt, but perks and plenty of booze and it knocked that crap right out until the next morning. So this was all sort of relevant, I guess. I don't know if that helps you or anything. In short, shot through the shoulder, RPG shrapnel to the right calf, left thigh, and my left wrist and arm. Didn't hurt at the time, ached like heck afterwards, but nothing opiates and liquor couldn't fix. Okay, so I kind of glossed over it lightheartedly on purpose because it can get really sad really quick. But please, do not drink and take opiates. It was a really dumb thing to do. We lose quite a few guys to that stuff. Please don't be a moron like me. And whether it's a beer, a thanks for your service, or a welcome home, it truly means the world to guys like me. I don't know who's a D-bag enough to get annoyed about how you thank them, but the fact that people care about us is more than enough thanks for me. If there's anything I'd ask, I'd just say be patient with the combat vets in your life. A lot of us are a little disturbed or confused, or just plain scared or weirded out about civilian life. Not infinitely patient, though. We do need a kick in the butt as much as the next guy sometimes, too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was also shot in an attempted mugging in Chicago North Side at Rogers Park. My mistake was jogging late at night through the alleys to avoid foot traffic on the sidewalks near the red line. Two guys, thugs, walking opposite of me, stopped me dead in my tracks, pulled out a concealed gat and asked for my iPod. And of course, my thoughts at the time were, "You're not taking my music, because then I won't have anything to listen to at work the next day." And that was my honest thought. Having watched the Discovery Channel's The Science of Fighting, I, in an instant, moved to disarm the gat-toting guy by snatching it from his loose grip. But of course that didn't work. I think he fired off a round in an attempt to protect himself from me taking his weapon. Anyway, shot fired, I saw the pop, felt the energy, the heat, and started running away in the opposite direction in like a zigzag, like I used to do in the basketball drills. All the while, the other guy did nothing. Nobody chased me. I ran to the end of the alley to safety and called 911 as soon as I ran back to my apartment. CPD and medics arrived within 3 to 4 minutes, disrobed me, found an entrance wound and no exit wound. Adrenaline wore off, and yes, it burns all around the affected areas. Anyway, I kept the bullet inside me since it was a more complicated thing to remove. It was a .22. And no, it doesn't trip the airport metal detectors. Got shot. First thought, did that hit me? Doesn't feel like it. Try to move. Holy crap, it hit me. Does it hurt? Well, blood is gushing out. I was very confused, as you can tell. Oddly, it didn't hurt at all until the next day. The doctor gave me plenty of pain meds to help me sleep, so when I jumped out of bed, I was given a harsh reminder that I was very much injured. I was robbed and shot on August 19th of 2006. I was put on my knees and shot in the back of the head, execution style. The bullet, a .40, entered my head directly beneath and behind my right ear and exited about 2 inches below my Adam's apple. I fell forward, face first. I didn't feel myself hit the ground. Retrospectively, I guess I was in shock. But at the time, it was slow and painless, like it is in the movies. It was quiet, too. Loud first, big bang, like a firework right behind my head, and then silence. I didn't know what had happened, but I was still conscious. I recall the whole thing. Fortunately, I felt the front door slam away as the robbers ran out. They hadn't been prepared to have to murder someone that day. Things had gone wrong for all of us. The door was heavy. It was a vibration in my otherwise distant world. I was looking ahead, across the plain on my white carpet. Things were diagonal. Somehow I registered it was wrong, but I didn't mind. It was only when I saw my blood on the white carpet that I realized something was up. It was red. My carpet's white. I knew there was cleaning to do. I thought to myself, oh, that's bad. That doesn't belong there. And then I began to recall what had led up to it. Being marched around my home for the valuables, them asking me if I had a rope, the hammer I grabbed and swung unsuccessfully before I heard the firework. Then I knew what had happened. It's hard for me to say what it felt like because I didn't feel much until I was in the hospital. But I do recall the way it burned at first. Then I was just wet and cold and getting colder quickly. I called 911 and told them I'd been hit and thought it was in the head. I tell the story sometimes comically, but in truth, I had to listen to the call for testimony. I was meek, desperate, gargling on my own fluids. It was my worst moment, recorded for posterity's sake. What does it feel like? It felt like a cut. A deep, white cut. It felt like all of my memories and my personality and what I was or would be were draining out of a hole I couldn't plug. Although I can't say how it feels to be shot, I'll say this. Having a weapon point blank in your face when you're powerless to do a thing is a terror that sticks out to you. The comments here have varying reactions to the actual wound, but the psychological reaction in my particular experience is worse than any physical pain I've incurred. My friend has been hit once or twice by irresponsible, bad-aiming grandparents while dove hunting. He was less than 200 yards away, and they were shotties. It's funny to see his shorts with bird-shot holes in them. Wait. People hunt doves? Like, I know that people hunt ducks and geese and edible things, and I could fully get behind a massive pigeon shooting event because God knows I'd love to see less of those things. But why would you specifically go out of your way to shoot those relatively benign symbols of peace? I had a really awful human being as a boyfriend when I was a teen. One night he'd been playing poker with his buddies and drinking. I'd been told to lay in bed and just wait, which is where I was always told to be when I was to be at his beck and call, but also out of the way. After about 4 or 5 hours of him and his buddies playing poker and drinking, he called for me to come out and sit with him. I did. When I got there, his one friend made a comment like, "How the heck did you get your B-word to be so obedient?" And my boyfriend replied, "She knows where she stands." Now, one of my boyfriend's friends, we'll call him Joe from now on, had his suspicions about my boyfriend, who will be Alex from now on. Joe had asked me a few times if I was okay, but I'd never said anything because I was too scared and alone. At this point, Alex had made me cut contact with all of my family, friends, and school, everything. So, while the boys kept playing and drinking, Alex told me to sit on his lap to give him good luck. Alex continued to lose, and Joe could see that I was getting nervous. I knew it would be a worse night for me if Alex lost all of his money. So Joe, thinking he was helping, started trying to cheat to make Alex win. This is where I get fuzzy on the details because I've blocked out a lot of it by now. Alex figured that Joe was cheating to lose, and he didn't like that. So he was asking Joe why. Joe said he must have had a rough streak or something, and Alex didn't believe him. So he started getting aggressive towards Joe. I, stupidly, made a comment like, "Leave him alone. Maybe he's just bad at poker." That made Alex feel like maybe there was a reason that I was standing up for Joe, and he started berating me that I was cheating on him with Joe, and if I was so in love with him, why didn't I just go home with him tonight? There was a slap, which was the first time he'd ever hit me in front of people, and Joe grabbed me and said it was time to go. Alex got up and took a swing at Joe. They had a bit of a scuffle while the other 3 guys tried to calm everyone down. Joe grabbed my hand and started to take me up the stairs and out of the house. Alex was yelling after me, telling me that I was a good-for-nothing working girl and how Joe would see how promiscuous I was and I wasn't to come crawling back to him when I effed up with Joe. As Joe and I were getting into his car, Alex came running out of his house, pointing a weapon at Joe. Joe said something like, "Alex, just calm down, I'm going to take her to my place so everyone can take a breather and we'll figure it out later." Alex then turned his weapon on me instead and said something like, "It's not your fault, Joe, it's hers." Joe tried to tackle Alex, but the trigger had been pulled. Luckily, Joe had pushed his arm just enough that the bullet hit my ear and didn't do too much damage. I have a tiny bit of hearing loss. My ear had to be reconstructed, but I did make it out alive. Sorry for the huge long story, it's been a long time since I told it. And for those wondering, no, I didn't get out of there after that. This is the part that's the most embarrassing, and I think only another battered woman would understand it. I went back to him after a week at Joe's, although I did eventually leave. I was shot in the shoulder and clavicle area by a .45. At first, I felt and heard nothing. It was almost like watching a dream. Then I felt very hot, and the wound itself felt like, well, I don't know, like a searing hot piece of metal was driven through flesh and bone. The bullet didn't go all the way through my bone, by the way, it penetrated and got stuck in. I didn't fall down or anything. I stayed on my feet and walked through the house and to the front door after calling 911. I don't know how long it took them to get there, but it felt like they were instantly there since time felt really insubstantial. I walked to the ambulance and they put me on a stretcher where I was given meds and passed out. Shot myself in the foot with a .17 air rifle when I was a child. It hurt so very much. I was on the verge of tears. My parents would have taken it away if I'd told them the truth. The rifle was fairly new, so it went right through the foot and out the rubber sole and into the buffalo grass in front of the garden. It was very dear to me at the time, not so much the rabbits and other introduced species. Hobbling over to the workshop, I found a roofing nail and poked it through slowly, which hurt even more so than the slug. The joy in seeing the point of it peek out between my laces was only surpassed during my first dose of unprotected whoopee years later. It worked, however. My mum and dad still have no idea that I shot myself in the foot with my birthday present. I got shot through my right leg years ago when I was doing gang stuff. Bullet hit in the back of my leg just below my knee, right on the bend, and it lodged in my leg. I had a lot of adrenaline going, so I didn't really feel pain. My brain just pushed it to the side. I felt something impact me, and it felt weird, but it didn't really click until the shooting had stopped. Having it removed sucked though, that I definitely felt. What is the nastiest thing you've done to a customer's order at a restaurant? I worked at a popular fast food chain in my younger years. It was my first time with closing shift and we were all doing our part to clean and prep the store. I see this lady with a mop and bucket come out of the back, slop it on the griddle and start just mopping it. I was appalled. I went back and told the manager and she tells me, well, that's the quickest way to clean it, and then scolded me for worrying about things that didn't concern me. I quit that job the next day and called the district office and told them what had happened. That location closed down not long after. But the franchise still exists. I mean, there's such a thing as a grill mop, but it's absolutely distinct from a floor mop. You don't confuse the two. I knew a guy that peed in a bucket of pickles. He would never have been caught if he didn't talk about it. There were other things going on at that McDonald's that helped ruin the reputation. It was also competing with another well-managed restaurant in a town that never really had room for both of them. The guy I'm talking about was just one of the most immature teens I've ever known. The funny thing is that he's married to my sister now and has a much better job than me. He slowly transformed into a responsible adult after having a child. The worst thing I did was to this one guy that I already didn't like, and he was being kind of a butthole, so I overcooked his eggs. Poured a whole tray of drinks over a guest. Twice. International trade fair with students as waiters. First time was an accident. Second time, she was so nervous she was practically shaking and spilled the drinks again on the very same guy. I saw a waiter pour an orange juice, take a big swig with his lips on the rim, top it up and then take it to the table. In college, I worked for a well-known pizza place. One of our waitstaff came to collect a pepperoni pizza and nabbed a piece of the pepperoni off the top before taking it out. He gets to the table and everyone is staring at him in stunned silence. There's a very fine string of cheese going from the pizza to his mouth. I had a buddy at McDonald's, a real chaotic type, who every once in a while would say, "Oh hey, guess what time it is? It's pickle surprise," and put a whole handful of pickles on a random cheeseburger. I mean, personally, I think your definition of nasty is off, as I'd probably be fine with that. I'd probably only have to pick a few out, to be honest. Love me a lot of pickles. Also, I would not be surprised if we were about to get many, many more stories from the Golden Arches. Case in point. I worked at McDonald's in high school, and I had a buddy who was basically like the pickle guy. The best one I remember was a girl we knew who ordered a burger with no onions. He took her burger patty, carefully carved it out so it became a burger ring, put that on the bun, and filled the entire center with onions. It was maybe 10% burger, 90% onion, but it looked totally normal from the outside. He never would have done it to a stranger, but friends were fair game. I also went through and ordered a burger one time, and he handed me the bag with what I thought was an evil grin. Turns out he'd put 9 patties on it. My other buddy who ordered 2 burgers got one with 4 patties and one with 5. Nastiest thing I've ever done? Well, I gave them what they ordered. We were a pizza/Italian/bar restaurant. Our menu was ludicrously large, and essentially anything that was on the menu that could go on a pizza was listed as a topping. Probably 40 to 50 topping choices. I'd get asked pretty often for a pizza with everything on it. I had a usual joke or two to find out what they really wanted. Typically a deluxe, but then they'd want no black olives or whatever. No big deal. Until the butthole came in that ordered, quote, everything, and then proceeded to ask if I was retarded when I questioned him. See, my sister is disabled, so I didn't appreciate his tact. I told my boss about it, and he smiled and said, "Get him a pizza with everything then." Bought it out and gave it to him. He flipped out and demanded the manager, of course. My manager had my back and gave the guy his bill, which at $2 a topping was well over a $100 pizza. The guy refused to pay. Cops got called, yada yada yada. I hope he enjoyed his pizza with clams, pineapple, buffalo chicken, broccoli, anchovies, green olives, cream cheese, cauliflower, jalapenos, and shrimp. Worked at a 50s-style diner. I was prepping the chicken breasts for our burgers and dropped a tray of 50, and they slid right under the grill. Easily the dirtiest place in the whole restaurant. My boss saw and had me pick them all up, rinse them with water, re-season them, and stick them back in the fridge. Yeah, I stopped eating there when I wasn't working after that day. At my last restaurant, my coworker would make very ugly sundaes for customers who were rude. For particularly nice customers, she'd painstakingly recreate the sundaes in the menu pictures and give them extra cream and sprinkles. Yeah, pretty much this. I'll make what you order, but I won't put any love into it. If you're a decent human, I'll try to make you the best version of what you order. I should say that tampering with food is not very common. I've been in the business a long time, and I've only worked with one girl who spat in someone's food. Another server saw her, and she got reported and fired immediately. The only other thing that sometimes happens is when people get cocky and ask for extremely spicy food. The kitchen staff turn into evil geniuses then. A guy once asked me for wings so spicy that they'd give a woman a miscarriage. I relayed those lovely instructions to the kitchen, and I don't know what they did, but the sauce was burning my nose and making my eyes water just for carrying it out. He was not able to finish his wings. My dad started going to his neighborhood pub frequently for wing nights, and he'd ask for wings as hot as you can make them. Went on for quite a while, with them just dousing them with as much Frank Reds as you could possibly fit on them, because that's all they had for hot wings. Well, I guess eventually the cook got sick of being asked for as hot as you can make them, and acquired some special ingredients. Next time my dad asked for as hot as you can make them, he got a dozen wings spicy enough to strip paint off the space shuttle. My dad went back to just asking for plain hot wings or extra hot from then on. One time we had a woman call back because her rotisserie chicken was, quote, burnt. I explained it's just charred because of the way it's cooked. She wasn't having that, so we agreed to get her a new one. 10 minutes after her husband left, she called back even more angry, saying this one was worse. We told her to send her husband back again for a new one. The manager and I went back with gloves on and scraped off all the burnt parts. And I crap you not, 10 minutes after he leaves, she calls again, but this time her rice didn't have any craisins on it. So once again, I told her to send him back. I dumped so many frickin' craisins on that rice, I think she got the point, and we never heard from or saw them again. I know it's not super gross, but it's pretty rare to see someone maliciously F with someone's food. I've seen cooks use the 5-second rule when dropping food or not washing hands, but that's about it in my 7 years in the industry. Some Indian guys came in one time and asked for us to make their food as spicy as possible. I told them that's going to be extremely spicy and wanted to make sure they knew what they were asking for. They went on a long rant about how Indian restaurants are the only places that actually know what spicy is, and anything we bring out isn't going to be close to how spicy they like their food. So I had the owner come over to tell them that we'll try our best, but there won't be any refund on this food if it's too spicy. So we made them chicken fried rice with Trinidad scorpion peppers. After 2 bites and about 10 glasses of soy milk later, they ordered something else. I worked in a very well-known fast food chain for a while. My favorite example of this actually involved nothing. The person who bought the food had been rude to staff on multiple occasions. The person serving went to get their food, popped around the corner in a noticeable way, then returned, having done nothing. He gave the food to him with a huge grin on his face and said, "Enjoy." He then watched the person throw it in the bin when he went outside. I worked for Applebee's for 7 years, and not until my last year did I witness this act. One of the cooks would drop down to 1 pair of tongs for the grill station for closing. He used the same tongs for raw chicken, beef, seafood, and cooked food. He would swish the tongs in his sanitizing solution that looked like soup since he never changed it, and claimed that it was good after that. I called him out on that, and he told me that he never told me how to cook, so I should just let him be. I told management too, and it was swept under the rug like everything else. I quit shortly after, but that was the only time I witnessed something frickin' disgusting like that. That sounds like a gnarly brine, alright. There are 2 sorts of people in these chain restaurants, those who care way too much about rules and those who do literally just enough to not get fired. And it sounds like the second guy had worked out exactly where that line was with his lazy managers. My stepmom was super rude to a server, kept sending her chicken wings back and complaining. The last time the wings came out, the whole kitchen staff seemed to pile out and look at her. She refused to eat the wings and yelled at the server some more. It was so embarrassing. I would have left. I once had a customer have a complete temper tantrum, and her boyfriend, I assume, just got up and left her there. Interestingly enough, if we're going to dinner with her, my husband or I will bring cash so that we can do just that. I felt so badly for the server and the kitchen staff. Now, I carry enough money to be able to drop it on the table to pay for our meal and tip the server and apologize on the way out. My tolerance for people being rude or mean to others has gotten quite low. Worked in a fast food pizza joint. Nothing without consent of the customer happened, but customers did ask for some weird, nasty stuff. One time, a customer asked for extra chili and emphasized a lot. So of course, we put like a lot on it. Another person wanted chicken legs and wanted them extra crisp. He kept sending them back until it was pretty much burnt, which is when he found it perfect. The worst one, though, was a woman asking to put her pasta in a blender because she had just gotten prosthetics and couldn't properly eat. It looked disgusting. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This isn't really bad, but a lot of the times when people send their food back and there's just clearly nothing wrong with it, and the chefs will just rearrange the food on the plate, wait a minute or two, and then send it out to the table. The funniest part is when the customer then says it's better. I had a crap manager tell me I had to mop the floor again after I'd just done it perfectly. So I just waited 10 minutes and told him I'd done it. He comes out and says, "See, that wasn't so hard, was it?" It really wasn't, since I did jack all. I have not worked in a restaurant in over 15 years. I never messed with anyone's food because that is assault. What I used to do to snotty Karen types is give them a senior discount and announce to the table when I dropped the check that I remembered to add said discount. I mean, that's funny because if they complain, that's going to cost them money. They wanted extra mayo, so I maliciously complied by drenching it. The lady thought I'd forget her fake $10 prayer tip the last time she was here. I worked at McDonald's in high school and college, and this kind of malicious compliance was the worst we ever did. Our worst was a guy who wanted extra pickles on his quarter pounder. We covered that thing. He comes back and says, "That's not extra." Okay, so he slapped a big frickin' handful of pickles on the new one, like almost couldn't wrap the thing. It was 80% pickles. He started to get huffy, but the manager goes, "Well, we didn't want to shortchange you this time and figured it was better to give you too many, and you could pick them off than too few." And then he stormed out. Not a restaurant, but the prepared food section of a highly regarded grocery store. Someone forgot to toss the old potato salad that was on its 4th day. That stuff needs to be thrown out at the end of the 3rd day. We were supposed to keep track of this stuff religiously. The manager told my coworker to just mix it in with the brand new stuff, so people were eventually being given 6-day-old potato salad. I guess worse things could have happened, but I'm squeamish about food, so it really bothered me. The most memorable one was once when a customer made a waitress cry complaining about their food and sent it back. The chef farted on the remake, and it got a lot of laughs. More common is if a customer is a butthole, when they order dessert, you find the smallest slice of cheesecake you can. Worked in a deli for a few years. I never tampered with anyone's food, but if you were a jerk, I guaranteed your bread was over-toasted, the lettuce on your sandwich was wilted, the tomato was the butt end with the hole from us removing the core, your onions were little pieces, the meat was the smallest of the portions, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't tamper with someone's food, but I damn well wasn't making them a good sandwich. And all of that goes the exact opposite way with the customers I liked. Always gave them the best product, to the point that they'd wait for me to help them. I used to work at a local pizza restaurant in a town known for its pizza. The cook always carried around a dirty, stained brown rag he'd used to wipe his hands and sweat off his face and blow his nose into. On multiple occasions, I've seen him let the rag touch the pizza while he was preparing it. When I was a pizza delivery driver, when habitual non-tippers ordered, I wouldn't cut their pizza all the way through. I worked in a movie theater. We got people who complained all about how the concession lines were so long, their movie's about to start, blah blah blah, all before they even placed their order. So now everyone else has to wait longer. You can bet I didn't butter the middle of their popcorn, just the top. And I filled their soda cup all the way up with ice before putting the soda in. Just keeping it speedy. I worked at a pizzeria joint in high school. The owners of the pizza place also had a woodworking business on the side, and they always gave this one butthole, nasty prick worker from that business 75% off anytime he came into the pizza store. That's fine, no problem. However, he'd always come in at like 9:55 p.m. when we closed at 10, without fail right when we got done cleaning everything. This would happen 2 to 3 times during the week. He knew exactly what he was doing because he was always a massive prick just like that. And it was always a massive order, maybe a burger, some broasted chicken, and a pizza, so everything got dirty. To top it off, he'd sit there and eat the burger and some chicken and take the pizza home. That means we had to wait for him to get done and wait on him as we had a strict nobody closes alone policy. So 2 of the 3 would be stuck there. and we couldn't close early or lock the doors because he saw the owners every day from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the woodworking business, and he'd 100% rat us out. After a couple of months of this, the store manager finally got sick of it, took the buns, put them down his crotch, and let them sit there for a few minutes until his burger was done. I worked in restaurants for 10 plus years and never saw anybody intentionally messing with a customer's food. Honestly, it's just not that common in my experience. Same. Been in the business my whole life. Saw something deliberate only one time? There are plenty of sanitary issues in almost every restaurant, don't get me wrong. Some worse than others. But it's very rare for someone to deliberately mess with your food. Cross and physical contamination and temperature issues are a much bigger issue. Yeah, the issue that most people just aren't that awful to their customers, no matter how awful their customers are to them, has been a real problem writing this video. Turns out that most people in hospo are too decent or need the jobs too much to actually go out of their way to do something really entertaining. I'll try and find a few more of the golden ones before we finish up here. Worked at a movie theater for a while. Our pizzas came frozen in a large bag of many pizzas, so the contents sometimes got shifted around during shipping. One guy was acting like it was the end of the world because he got there late, hungry, and had to wait in line. He ordered a pepperoni pizza, so my coworker went to the freezer, pulled out a pizza with one slice of pepperoni on it, and tossed that sucker into the oven. The guy eventually got a refund, but that must have felt good just to see the reaction from him. When I bartended, the worst thing I ever did to an order was to pour a legal pour instead of being generous. The worst way I treated a customer was that once I refused to pick up the 2 dimes and a nickel he tried to tip me for his $14 drink, and when he said, "Hey, my man, this is for you," I replied with a terse, "Keep it, you clearly need that money more than I do. People don't mess with your food or drink, because that's our job, we take pride in it, but if you tee us off, we'll just refuse to serve you." There were only 3 things I'd ever do as a waitress: stingy ice cream if your kids were brats, bigger serve if they were well behaved. One table were extremely racist to my colleague, so I was given their table and they were so nice to me. So then I overcooked their free brownie so it was burnt in some spots, and put too much chocolate topping on their brownie so it was sickly sweet and very hard to eat. If they'd complained, I wouldn't have pled ignorant about burning it, and I would have said I was being nice with the extra topping. There's this lady and her daughter that come into my restaurant. Every time I've served them, they make you run. "We need more ranch. I want another margarita, extra ketchup," etc., etc. My favorite was the time when I asked if they wanted ranch with their wings. "Nope." And then literally as soon as I brought out the wings, "Oh, and we need ranch." And they never tip. Or if they do, it's insultingly low. Like once the tab was $48.50 and they gave me $50, and I brought the change back and the daughter, who's in her mid-20s, smirks and says, "Oh no, that's for you, sweetie." I left it there and walked away without a word. Now, whenever they come in, they just take forever to get served. And their margaritas that they drink like water, mostly because they may as well be, they're probably about half strength compared to what everyone else that doesn't act like jerks towards the staff gets. Their food sits under the heat lamps getting stale for a while. The kitchen is aware of this and the reason for it, and they're on board since these witches send their food back all the time claiming it's wrong even though it was made exactly to order, and of course they always waited until it was more than half eaten to complain. I genuinely cannot stand them. The younger one always just smirks when she orders things like she thinks you're such a pleb for being a server. Back in college, I worked in a fast food kitchen. We would make crappy or rude customers' orders with hate instead of indifference. As we always said, the food shouldn't suffer because the person who ordered it was a C-word. One time I ordered a liter of cola and the kid working the register secretly poked a hole in the cup. If you behave like a butthole to baristas at Starbucks, you'll get decaf espresso shots in your latte or cappuccino or frappe or whatever. If you ordered tea, they will not shake it. This is the way. This isn't really that bad, but lots of restaurants are guilty of it. The little date or day or timestamps on stickers and wrappers and salads, look closely next time. If there's one stuck on top of the other, or if there's more than one mark on the wrapper, your food has probably expired. Sometimes this is done because the food actually is still good and it's a shame to waste it, but other times it's a lazy worker who doesn't want to make more food, or a greedy owner who doesn't want to lose 3 cents. The type of stickers and labels varies by restaurant. Some timestamps look like clocks, and some are a line of numbers 1 through 12, with a mark through the one where the item expires. For example, if your sandwich has a mark through the 11 and it's now 3, your sandwich expired 5 minutes ago, but honestly it's probably still good. I work at Sonic. A lady complained, and there was a wire bread tie in her burger. That still bugs me. It was over 10 years ago. I worked at a golf course restaurant. One of my female coworkers had some crude crap said to her by one of the old golfers. Something along the lines of, "With a butt like that, you shouldn't be in the kitchen. You should be on the course serving us beers." Then he ordered a ham sandwich on the turn to the back nine. She licked the F out of that ham before putting it on the sandwich, then wrapped it in saran wrap, punched it, went out and handed it to him herself. I worked at a Taco Bell that used to be a combo Taco Bell and Pizza Hut, so it had this hood for the oven that was no longer there. One really tall guy used to rest his gloved hands up there between orders and then make food. Once, to prove a point, I wiped it down to show him how dirty it was. He said, "Great, now it's clean." Also, night shift would put dirty cardboard boxes on the fryer area to put the fried food to cool, so they could wash the tray. There was once a footprint on the box. I have more stories. Don't eat fast food at night. What are Reddit's greatest mysteries of all time? There was a guy on the legal advice Reddit who claimed that every time he stepped outside, whether the front or back door, his neighbor would honk their horn. He said it would happen every single time without fail, but not when anyone else in his household went out. He also said it was happening for several years. Everyone suggested he had a mental illness, which was a likely explanation, but I wish we got an update from that guy. There was an account called Is There Life After Lyme, as in Lyme disease. I discovered the account about a year ago, and I was fascinated reading these past comments and posts. It appears to belong to a woman who at first thought she had Lyme disease, but actually had a degenerative brain disease, whose husband left her for another woman and eventually gained custody of their child. A lot of us who followed believed that her LLMD essentially did this to her by insisting on giving her sketchy alternative medicine that seemed to be inducing frequent and severe psychotic episodes for a disease that she almost certainly didn't have. Who knows if she had some other disease or mental health issue, but the treatments that she was taking for years certainly didn't seem to be helping and were apparently causing her hallucinations and delusions. This, according to her, was a sign that they were working, despite seeing no improvement in her original symptoms. The comments eventually turned into her begging for the guy to give her daughter back. She resumed posting for a little bit after getting out of jail, but now her account is gone again. There was a post in the relationship Reddit maybe a year ago from a woman who had found some disturbing content on her boyfriend's computer. He had gone out of town and she was looking through his laptop and found out about his extreme and very specific interests in all matters pertaining to the boudoir, namely the domination and bringing about of pain on the other party. If I recall correctly, she was an Asian woman, and his fantasies about that stuff apparently focused on Asian women. She said some other stuff, like about how he'd go out of town on hunting trips with old buddies for days at a time, but she'd never met any of these friends. There was some other circumstantial, potentially disturbing stuff, and she deleted the post soon after, and I never saw anything about it, but a lot of people were telling her to get out of the house before he got back. There was a post a few years ago about a guy who had served in the military, had PTSD, and his wife and partner would jump out and scare him despite him making it known he didn't like it. One day he was in the bathroom and she burst in, surprising him, and he turned around and punched her fair in the face. He was scared and didn't know what to do or whether he'd be charged, and never posted any follow-ups. Still wondering what happened to that one. Well, that's just a really sad story no matter what way you look at it, and there are still no updates. In case you were wondering, folks, don't punch your partners, and definitely don't jump out at traumatized folks because they may not have much control over how they respond. There was a post on WTF about 5 years ago where someone killed someone and took pics of their decapitated head with sunglasses. The mods took it down because apparently reverse image search showed nothing. I think it was from the relationship Reddit. Woman who thought she was being tricked by her boyfriend. She described smelling cooked fish, but he'd served chicken for dinner. Eventually, commenters convinced her to go to the hospital. She updated with, "It's a brain tumor. I have surgery tomorrow." I still think about that post, and I never really found out if things worked for her. It legitimately freaks me out. It was really weird things too, like she'd think her boyfriend told her that he was cooking salmon, she'd smell salmon cooking, and then she'd walk into the kitchen and he'd have made lasagna. Or that he would have told her that he was going out that evening, and then she'd come home and he'd be like, "Didn't we agree that we'd do a movie night?" Or something like that. She thought her boyfriend was playing mind games with her and was super confused. And then the edit was just, "This is scary, but I have a tumor in my brain. I'm having surgery tomorrow." Another one from the relationship Reddit. A few years ago, there was this post. If I remember right, a family friend was staying with a married couple after being diagnosed with cancer and being incredibly down on his luck with prior ailments. The wife started noticing inconsistencies in this friend's stories, and him never wanting company to any of the doctor's visits seemed a little odd. She was also questioning how he could appear in relatively good health while claiming he's receiving aggressive treatments for his health issues. She posted because she was growing suspicious and wanted validation if it was odd, and if so, how to approach her husband with it. Fast forward to a few months back, and there's a sword and scale episode about it. Apparently the friend attacked and killed her, knifed the husband too, and then tried to self-delete. He was faking all along while stealing money from the wife's company. I've searched for the post, but I haven't been able to find it. There was a page asking older virgins why they were still virgins, and this 40-something-year-old guy answered, and then his last sentence was some joke about not wanting to be alive anymore. People kept prying, and he eventually said something about waiting for his mother to pass away so he could self-delete guiltlessly. I think he said she had just died and he planned to do it in about 3 months or something. He had this thing all planned out and thought through. He said no one could talk him out of it, and after going through more and more of his post history, he seemed more and more genuine and not at all like a troll. He was very polite about the whole thing, if that makes any sense. I thought about saying anything at all to him, but everyone else who did was politely thanked and dismissed, and I couldn't think of anything original, so I held off. I had his comments saved, and I remember checking in on it sometime later, well after those 3 months, and he hadn't posted anything after that point. I still think about it from time to time. There was a really creepy post from a guy who found a bunch of Wi-Fi signals from a hole in the ground in Hawaii and linking the owner to a strange eBay store that sells, quote, broken hard drives with very happy customers. All the reviews were people being way overly enthusiastic about these broken hard drives, which sold for a good chunk of money. There was a girl telling a story about how she was 6 months or so out from marrying her fiancé. Nothing seemed to be wrong with the relationship, and they absolutely loved each other. However, one day he went out to go get milk, but never came back. He even bought the milk too because they saw the charge, but nobody knows what happened to him. I think this happened a very short while ago too. Okay, found it. But I think she deleted the comment since it's not in the original thread anymore. Here's what she posted. My fiancé disappeared. We were both 27 and have been a couple since the age of 16. Friends before that. A little bit over 2 years ago, we started a sort of road trip all over the country with our own self-made tiny house on wheels. We had the most fun ever just traveling with the two of us. We did this for all this time, and 7 months ago, while lying on our bed and talking, he just asked me if I wanted to marry him. I obviously said yes. Things just got even better from there. A week after that, he went to the store in the city we were currently living in while I'd already started cooking, and he never came back. He made it to the store and bought the stuff we needed, but he never came back. No one has heard of him since, not even his mum, who he was Skyping with every evening as long as we had connections available. I've lost everything. He was my boyfriend, fiancé, best friend, and also the only real friend, because it was only us two for the last years. I've pretty much given up on everything and have gotten really sick and have horrible health problems. I've also lost close to 25 kilos and I'm now extremely underweight. All of that in the last 6 months. I just want to know something, anything. There was a guy who showed up in Ask Reddit asking how his newborn child could have absolutely none of his traits in blood. A whole list of things were proposed, including that his wife was a chimera, not the mythological beast. Of course, eventually someone posted the most obvious theory, that the kid wasn't his. He said that was impossible, and after a few hours he said he was going to get a paternity test done just to show us. The next day he posted that it was done, and when he had the results in a few days, he'd post a picture to prove us all wrong. 2 days later, the post and account were deleted. If true, guessing the test went badly. There was a teenage girl who posted in the relationship Reddit a long time ago for dealing with her mum. The girl was extremely sick and the mum was crazy and thought that the cure for every disease was just eating more vegetables and didn't believe in doctors. Everyone was telling this poor girl to go to the emergency room ASAP because of the symptoms she listed. I just hope she's okay. Some guy found a coffin in his driveway. Inside it were a key and a piece of paper with geographical coordinates on it. He posted them. I went there and took pictures. It was a cemetery. The exact coordinate was actually between several graves. And no, I did not dig any of them up to solve the mystery. This was almost certainly an expensive prank, or one from someone who had a spare coffin for reasons unknown, but the infinitesimally small chance that one of these graves contained some sort of mystery or treasure is the kind of thing that'll scratch some of our brains forever. Very, very weird and wonderful. You know, there's a couple of posts I wonder about. One with the guy whose wife was pregnant, but he got fixed many years ago, and another one with the kid who found a spy camera in his foster parents' bathroom. A couple years ago, there was a young woman on the Raised by Narcissists Reddit whose parents were part of a deeply Christian faith and had arranged for her to marry a guy her age. She couldn't go to school, she couldn't have a job, her parents would lock her out of the house, and she was basically forced to live in a small backyard cabin with her soon-to-be husband. She had to hide the fact that she was posting because if her future husband found out, her parents would become violent. She was very scared of them. The parents gave the underage guy alcohol, and to put it lightly, he was not a good partner. But she couldn't do anything about it because the state she lived in would return runaways, and CPS had been around but never actually did anything. One day, she made a post that her husband had seen her posts. She was scared he'd ask questions, and then never posted again after that. I just wanted her to know that if she's still out there, we're still counting down to her 18th birthday. I hope you get free from those people. That person who won the $100 million jackpot was trying to escape his family and friends, who were after his money. Where are you now, friend? Ha, nice try, family member. Oh yeah, I remember that thread. Nightmare Expo did a video on that on YouTube. Apparently his mother tried to poison him, but it didn't kill him. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A young girl, about 19 if I remember, posted on relationships about her father. He had a shed that he banned all members of his family from entering, and one day she went in. He had his computer in there. If I remember correctly, there were photos on the computer which showed animals that had been subjected to some horrible treatment and then dismembered. The photos had clearly been taken in the shed. She said her dad was the perfect conservative father. He seemed to realize that she had used his computer and things were tense in the house. She deleted the post within a few hours. There was the one about the guy who went with his girlfriend to visit her parents, and in the middle of the night she got up and he thought he heard certain noises coming from the next room, leading him to believe the whole family was into some pretty immoral and illegal stuff, but he never posted an update after he said he was going to confront her about it. There was one with a 16 or 17-year-old kid who had just found out he apparently had a letter tattooed on his back that he never knew about. He had gone swimming with his friend and they commented on it. Never read an update and I can't find the post now. I've been wondering about him ever since. There was a kid who took his car to the mechanic for routine work or something, and the mechanic found a GPS tracker attached to his car. Someone who worked at that place that manufactured the devices commented that it was a specific model GPS tracker that only law enforcement use. And that's when crap hit the fan and things took off. I believe the original poster started connecting the dots and then the feds showed up out of nowhere trying to intimidate him. Turns out the FBI was tracking this kid. He found out when the FBI showed up at his house when he tried to sell the device on Craigslist. There are news articles about it and everything. His best friend, Khaled, had apparently made a suspicious blog post about a bomb and a mall. When the car owner asked his friend about it, he said he'd written something stupid but wasn't involved in any wrongdoing. There was the guy who posted about finding a weird hidden chamber behind a sealed manhole inside a motorway bridge as a teenager. Inside was a chair facing a wall with a picture of an undressed woman in a fairly grisly crime scene. The finder delivered and went back years later and took photos. They're frickin' terrifying. There was a post about a guy who sold his house and secretly lived at the bottom of the garden afterwards, but I can't find it anymore. There was one where a lady was cleaning her house and found a tooth, and somebody jokingly said, "Someone's living in your crawl space." But then a dentist looked at the tooth and revealed it was in fact a child's. The lady concluded there was certainly no child living in her attic. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in her place though. So she went into the attic and says there are some things up there and calls the cops. The next day she updates that there was indeed a dude just chilling in her attic, looking at adult magazines, peeping on her shower, stealing her lacy undergarments, and collecting number 1 and 2 in jars. Turned out to be the local church pastor. It was insane to read that as it played out in real time. It's by far not the most mysterious post on Reddit, but certainly in our little community over on Reddit Argentina. Basically, the user AmITheA made a post stating he wanted to visit Villa 31, an infamous slum over there. He wanted to talk with the people living there, walk around, and stuff like that. Everyone either advised against it, told him to find an insider as a guide, or joked about his death. And that was his last post 3 years ago. Never to be heard from again. We're pretty sure he's dead, but nobody knows anything for sure. The guy who actually somewhat credibly drew the conclusion that his mother was poisoning him with cyanide. Last he was heard from, he'd escaped to out of state. It was in the relationship Reddit. It was a self-described dwarf who said his tall girlfriend was mistreating him. He needed advice on how to or if he should leave. And the next day, the post was gone. I haven't found a follow-up and I'm really concerned for him. Anything the user Worthless319 posted. He seems like he's got some untreated mental disorder. He talked about shooting his own eggplant off, cooking it and eating it to please God or something, and he actually showed picture proof that he'd done that. He'd constantly post all of these weird questions about self-deletion for God or something until his post history ends with him saying how he was traveling across the country because he found someone who was willing to unalive him, but then he was headed back home because the guy was going to eat him after he died and he didn't want that. Also, he'd occasionally post cute pictures of his pets. Wow. Well, despite the very tempting prospect of seeing some cute little pets, I might have to forgo the opportunity to look up that profile because it sounds like there'd be some things that I just don't really ever want to have burned into my brain there. Yet another one from the relationship Reddit, in which a woman seemingly caught her nephew hiding some recording device at the bathroom she and her family used. The nephew was 18 years old. I remember she did one update where she talked to her husband and he wanted to involve the police, and she said she would probably do that and would update later. It's been maybe a year now, but couldn't find an update. Not so much a mystery as it's clear what happened, but we never got closure on it. The user Flippin'Flop's Datura post in the Substance Reddit. For those of you who don't know, Datura is an extremely potent medicine, or poison, that's classified as a hallucinogenic deliriant. Unlike psychedelics, they give true hallucinations that are not discernible from reality. Like you'll see your friend come into the room, have a long conversation, only to have them disappear into smoke. It's also a very confusing and disorienting substance that obliterates short-term memory and lasts a long time. Even in the Substance Reddit, a community where regular substance misuse is openly talked about, the consensus from everyone was, "Don't do it, dude, it's a horrible idea." The original poster decided, despite everyone saying, "Dude, don't do it," to go ahead with it anyway. Not too long after that, in that thread you can see him post, "Google.com how normal again, stop now." Then the next and last thing he posted was in the gaming Reddit where he says, "Please these big dog fighting nah okay," and then nothing else. Nobody knows if he died from taking too much, which isn't unlikely if what he said he took was true, he took a heroic dose. Or if he was a troll, or just suffered through that, or learned a lesson and quit substances forever. But there was nothing else posted by that account ever again. There was a guy who wanted to try smack. He was convinced he could give it up on demand. Everyone was telling him not to, and he did it anyway. The next 3 years of his posts, you could see his descent into addiction and cries for help to get out. I can't remember the username, but it was sad to see. The user Yay Video Games created a thread on the gaming Reddit and then spammed it with variations of the phrase "Steamworks goes Ubisoft DRM bye-bye." He then wrote 4,000 comments on that thread that were all different in a non-predictable pattern, so it's unlikely that a bot did it. He also sometimes posted links to creepy, weird images and even a picture of a piece of paper filled with this exact phrase. People believe he went insane, but we don't really know what happened. 2 years ago, a woman posted about how her husband had started knowing things that happened in the house, like someone dropping by but never entering the house. All these things that happened while he wasn't there. She mentioned he might be monitoring her and seemed pretty frightened. Also mentioned that he was in IT and probably on Reddit. After getting a ton of advice, she never posted again. I'm surprised that nobody has brought up the guy who was in an accident and lived a whole life with a wife and child while he was unconscious for a few minutes post-accident. That one was pretty messed up. If I recall correctly, he snapped out of it by staring at a lamp in the corner of his fake family's house. Someone posted that their extension cord blew a fuse and they found some odd device. Turns out there was a SIM card in there, and after he posted he was going to put it in a phone, he never posted again. It was a reply on the Ask Reddit a couple of years back. The original question was directed at campers and the like, inquiring about what strange or creepy or unexplainable things they'd found in the wilderness. The reply detailed an experience that their brother had while orienteering, finding a crater in the middle of an uncharted forest with a 1940s-style ambulance in the center of it. The gurney was still in there but bent, and there were brown smears all over the walls. The original poster said that their brother could probably find it again, but flat out refused to do so. Something about this has always haunted me, and I was hoping that there'd be an update when I dug through my saved posts to find this again, but it turns out the account hasn't been used in 2 years. 2 good ones, but I can't find the first one. It was a guy starting a conversation, asking how he could get a large amount of money, like right now, and everyone replying was not taking it too seriously until he posted a picture of some shady guys standing in a parking lot and staring in his direction, which seemed to imply he was probably in serious debt with some not very good people. He never made any replies after that. And the other one was when a guy found what seemed to be a GPS tracker in his car. At first everyone was talking about if he'd rented the car from somewhere shady, maybe it was someone the government was tracking, until the guy realized that the device would explain his extremely jealous girlfriend always seeming to know where he was, like he'd be somewhere and she'd just text him asking what he was doing at that place. One of his last posts said he was going to confront her when he got home, since she wasn't replying to any of his texts. He didn't post anything since that. A post where a woman was recording her sleep and caught another voice in the recording. It legitimately freaked me out listening to it. A couple of months ago, there was a post from a Russian lady who was sharing text messages she received from a guy while she was in a movie. He got really angry that she didn't reply, not knowing she was in a movie. The guy worked for the company she worked for and had been hoping to ask her out. I wasn't a member of Reddit then, but I downloaded the app after my friend, who's on Reddit, showed me the post claiming the guy might be my boyfriend. And he was. The Russian lady's post made the front page, and she replied hundreds of times to people. She gave out enough information that I could see that it was my boyfriend who contacted her. I confronted him and he confessed. We broke up shortly thereafter. The Russian lady's account doesn't seem to be active anymore. I don't want to mention her name for privacy's sake. I don't blame her because she didn't do anything wrong. On the plus side, the entire event brought me to Reddit, and I've enjoyed my experience here. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.